Now we are.
Hey, Sean, I'm here, Scott.
Hey. All right. If we're ready, I'll call the meeting to order at 10 o'clock. Do we have any, can we have roll call? Vanessa, can you do roll call?
Amber's going to do it, but yes, we'll do it.
Okay.
Okay, Sean,
Here.
Regan,
Here.
Steve Reinhardt,
Here.
Bruce, Brian Carroll,
Here.
Mike Morgan,
Here.
Dave Motley, Keisha Moulton,
Present.
Lee Warren.
Here.
Everybody's here?
Or Dave.
Do we, any reason, do we know of Dave's status? Tony or anybody?
Is Dave online?
No, isn't Scott online?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, Scott's online. She missed it.
Sean, we didn't hear back from Dave, so we don't know what his status is.
Okay.
His absence.
Okay, so no need to excuse it.
Nope.
Okay. All right. Moving on to item 3, housekeeping. Vanessa?
Good morning, everybody. It's my usual housekeeping, which is that we are both virtual and in real life. So for those that are here in the room, especially if you're down at the end of the table, the mic is pretty good, so you don't need to shout, but you also don't need to whisper. So just kind of, probably just a regular speaking voice, but you do want to be mindful that the mic's got to pick you up when you're down that way. In terms of those folks that are here virtually, it's helpful if you can to have your camera on. If you're a member of the committee, this group's a little bit different than my other ones, but it is helpful, so you can do that. If you want to speak as a committee member, you can always just chime in. However, knowing that that can also be difficult to do, to read a room from a virtual presence, having done it, you can also use that raise hand function depending on if you're in the app or just doing it online. It's either at the bottom of the screen or top of your screen, but it's a little smiley face with a hand. And as I say, if you raise your hand, don't forget to unraise your hand. And if you are a guest here today, there's a sign-in sheet over at that table. And if you have signed up for comment, anything like that, then let us know that you've done that. You can bring that over to us or to me or to Amber. And then just to confirm, this is so Scott Regan, you are on the call?
Yes.
Yes, he's the 512 number. Amber's just checking for our official records. Okay, that should be it.
All right. Okay, number 4, remarks from the chair. So I don't have much. Hope everybody had a good Christmas / holiday / Happy New Year. The only real remarks I have is just we got elections today, and as you can see, I'm virtual, which I don't think is ideal for the chair. I just got a lot of personal stuff going on, taking care of aging parents and stuff, and so I won't be running for chair today when we do elections. So thanks to the staff and everybody that assisted me while I was my last year as a chair, but I won't be running again as a chair. So I'll still be able to make the meetings and occasionally in person, but just a lot of stuff going on personally. So that's all I have. Item number 5, ratification of minutes. Do we have any comments or any changes on the minutes? Nope. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Any seconds?
Second by Scott.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Number 6, advisory committee training. Vanessa?
Okay. 1 second, let me do some fancy presenting. Okay. All right, I'm gonna stand because I prefer it, and I have this fancy thing this time. Okay, good morning, everyone. This is, we're gonna start doing an annual advisory committee training. And we are gonna try and do it in January, because that's usually when we have new members. This time, depending on what your rotation is in terms of terms and everything. This time around, we actually don't have anyone who's new, because you've had Brian reappointed. Welcome, Brian, to your new term. Very happy to have you. But this has been something that the chair of the commission and I talked about. We did sort of a launch at the commission workshop. And then we're taking it and turning it into advisory committee training, just for the purpose of going back, a little bit of a reminder of like who you all are, who we are, and what the functions of the advisory committee are, and also, what we want to think about and talk about as we have these meetings. I know a lot of you are pretty well versed in this. If you have any ideas, suggestions on this training as we walk through it, I am welcome to them. I welcome them, I guess is the right way to say that. So please feel free to send me an email, let me know, but my hope is that this will be not painfully long, but helpful. It's always my goal. Okay, so just as a little bit of an overview, and I know you all know this, but I think it's helpful to revisit it. So TREIC, the Texas Real Estate Commission, exists to safeguard the public interest and protect consumers of real estate services. And so that's really that consumer protection. We talk about we're a consumer protection agency. And so through education, licensing, and enforcement, the agency ensures the availability of qualified and ethical service providers, thereby facilitating economic growth and opportunity across Texas. So it's a little bit, that's our mission statement summarized. It's a little bit of a two-part mission, right? It's consumer protection, and it's that facilitate economic growth and opportunity across Texas. And so we always want to be mindful of both of those. I think we talk a lot about the consumer protection components. Just want to highlight that there's also that other part, and we do that through education, licensing, and enforcement. Those are our areas that we cover as an agency. So the commission itself, which is our governing body, we've got 9 members. They're appointed by the governor. 6, oh no. Oh yeah, that's right. I've just had I was like, wait, this is the inspector training. This is the commission. So it's appointed by the governor. 6 members who are brokers, and so they bring experience in the industries TREIC regulates. So they have to have been engaged as licensed brokers as their major occupation for the 5 years preceding appointment. And then we've got 3 members, and this is not dissimilar to the makeup of this group, right? So they've got 3 members who represent the public, and they are bringing that public consumer perspective to the commission. So they are wearing a little bit of a different hat, and that's important because you've got folks that serve on the commission that are also in the industry that they regulate. So you want to bring that public member perspective, that consumer protection side of things, and also a little bit of the I don't know, I think of it as the real world perspective too, of someone who's out there who maybe doesn't have all the background. I think it's helpful to walk through the reasons. I think this group did a good job of that. Looks like somebody's coming. Oh, okay. So that's the commission. So again, the driving force of the commission is consumer protection. All policy making decisions of the commission. So the commission really is our policy making body. They center on the
yeah, I'm on the meeting right now.
And facilitating economic growth and opportunity throughout the state. I think we can
Mute Scott.
mute Scott.
We can't mute Scott. He needs to mute himself.
Oh, Scott, you've got to mute yourself.
Because he's on his phone.
Oh, because you're on your, yeah. Okay. I guess Scott Regan, because I think there's 2 Scotts, yeah. Okay. So let's talk about advisory committees. TREIC has a lot of advisory committees, and those committees have subcommittees, and there's lots of meetings that go on in between commission meetings. It's actually amazing how many meetings happen in between those meetings. So you have your quarterly meetings, and in order to prepare for those, all the advisory committees meet, their subcommittees meet. There's approximately 1 million meetings for staff to prepare for those meetings. And so it really is a little bit of a rolling process. And so we've got these advisory committees, and I think this one is a special one, given the industry that it represents. So we've got, they're committees of stakeholders who meet to address relevant issues in the real estate industry. And these committees, what their goal is to make recommendations to the full commission, and that includes recommendations related to rulemaking and other policies. And we have a lot of different advisory committees. Some are more specific. So we've got like the Education Standards Committee. We've got a broker responsibility working group as committee. And then we've got this group. And you guys actually are charged with quite a bit as an advisory committee. So, okay, poll. How would you say TREIC? Because we've really been talking about this. Would you, I call it TREIC.
I call it the inspector committee.
Sure, but when it's like this, I think TREIC.
I was calling it TREIC.
TREIC, okay. Okay, does anybody have a preference? All right, TREIC it is. So this committee, the inspector committee, is established by statute under chapter 1102 of the Texas Occupations Code. That's your chapter. And so you are charged in statute with recommending rules for licensing inspectors, including rules relating to education and experience requirements, qualifying examinations, CE, which is continuing education, and granting or denying a license application, reasonable fees, SOPs, professional conduct, and ethics. So you have the longest list of all the committees. And you're charged with a pretty big task to make those recommendations to the full commission related to this. So who serves on your committee? We've got 6 members. It's pretty similar to that of what we talked about in the full commission. 6 members who have been engaged in the practice of real estate inspection for at least 5 years prior to the appointment and who are actively engaged in that practice. And we've got 3 public members who represent the interests of the general public and who are not registered, certified, or licensed by an occupational or regulatory agency in the real estate industry, a true public member component. And so then that's who we have in the room for the committee, right? There's other folks that are in the room right now. One of them is talking, right? So we've got the inspector committee. We've got myself and Abby, the lawyers. And so why are we here? We are here for a couple of reasons. One, we monitor open meetings and making sure everything, we're gonna do elections in a little bit, so we'll get some, depending on if there's any questions on Robert's rules, which are always a little stressful, we can do it. So we're here for that, but also we're here to answer any questions you might have, based on any recommendations you want to make. If you're thinking of proposing a change, is that a statutory change? Is that a rule change? What else would that impact? What would that look like? What have we as an agency been directed to be mindful of? And so we really serve as that resource. And I think that it's important to know, when I weigh in on something, I don't have a personal opinion. I truly actually just don't have a personal opinion. My only opinion on inspectors is I really loved ours when we bought our house. He was great. He's probably the reason we ended up buying our house, because he made me feel safe. And I loved that, right? That's it. And you guys seem really great and you're fun. You're kind of a fun group, I think. But other than that, I don't have opinions. Sure, depends. This is a good group. You give each other a hard time. I always appreciate that. And so, but what we're trying to weigh in on is what are the legal limits? What are the things you want to consider, right? So if somebody is like, I have this idea, and there's no issue with that idea. There's no laws that factor in that are going to be potentially problematic. It's not going to go against direction we've been given. That's a really short conversation of like, yeah, that seems good, and no one ever remembers those conversations, probably because they don't happen all that often. But also because they're shorter. The longer conversations are, okay, so you're thinking about recommending this change. Let's look at what the current limitations are, what's in statute, what's in rule, what do we have authority to do? If you do this, is it gonna run into something related to, I think about that governor's letter we'll talk about in a minute, related to barriers to entry? Does it implicate the regulatory compliance division of the governor's office? Just things like that. And so I bring all of that up, not to dissuade, but just to say, hey, here's what you're gonna see. Here's going to be the things that come up. And the reason I do that is I want to build the trust here to know that I'm going to bring that stuff up and that you all will know, hey, you know what, we might face this. Hey, this might happen. This does look like it's statutory, which is a little bit harder. So maybe there's a rulemaking route we can approach that does something similar. And the reason for that is I never want it to be that the chair of the committee walks up and they give all their recommendations, and for the first time ever, you hear me turn on my microphone and be like, well, actually, you can't do any of that, and I need to advise against that. I don't want to be in that situation. I want you guys to trust me and to know that I'm going to tell you what the hurdles are down the road. And if you want to move forward with a recommendation, that's cool. Does that mean I'm going to mention those same hurdles and pitfalls to the commission? Yes, 100%, right? That's my job. But I just want to make sure that we understand why we're in the room. The second level of that of TREIC staff that are in the room in these meetings are what we call our subject matter experts. And they are almost always the same people, but not always. But for example, we've got Denise, right? She is in charge of licensing. She's the director of licensing. So she knows she knows all your requirements, she knows all your rules. She's actually a very good expert on the rules, but she also knows how it works. Like, well, if they were to recommend this, the way that the current system is, it's actually gonna conflict with this and you can't do that and it triggers this and versa, but we're getting a new database. Like, we can have those conversations. So she's here to give you that sort of the functional subject matter expertise as you look forward to making these recommendations. Look, there's Dave. We've also got Mike here, Mike Malloy. We've got Tony and some of the other attorneys I think are on the call. They provide that enforcement perspective and they can be really helpful. I'm always surprised at the questions you all are able to just answer right away when it's like, well, how many of this and that? And they don't always have it, but I think that's helpful. They give you that report so that you can see what's happening out there, things like that. We've got Jen, she's our education expert. She is routinely in every meeting because there's always inevitably some sort of question as it relates to education and what would that look like and what are the current requirements and what have we seen historically. And we want to be able to provide that perspective so that the group has that information when it's making its recommendations. And it doesn't, it may be, a lot of times right now, we have a new database that's coming, and so there's a lot of discussion of like, is that something we wanna do now? Is that something we wanna wait until we've got this new database? But also, are we putting unrealistic expectations on this new database? So I mean, these are the conversations, right? So this is the question that the chair gave me this language, which is, which hat do you wear when you come to a meeting? You all are inspectors, you're engaged in the business that you're making recommendations on, but when you come here, you're in a little bit of a different role, right? You have volunteered your time to look at, to make recommendations to the full commission as it relates to consumer protection and also facilitating that economic growth and opportunity. But if we look at someone like Keisha or Brian, you're wearing a totally different hat, right? Because you're not inspectors. You're wearing that consumer hat and you're asking the questions, and you may not always be as well versed in some of the requirements. And so I've seen you all speak up and ask the questions, and I think that's great. Active public members, I think Dave just joined that. I mean, that's a real backbone component to these advisory committees. So I think this group has been very fortunate to have very actively engaged public members since my time here. And so then you also want to ask, like, where does consumer protection fit in when it comes to your recommendations? To some extent, you could always kind of tack on consumer protection, right? It's X, Y, Z and consumer protection because of this. But is that truly the driving force of what you're saying? Or is it, this would just make my business easier? Or is what you're talking about something that you've run into where you've seen consumer harm, you've seen, a potential for improvement? And I think that that hat can be a little bit harder to wear, to separate the two. And sometimes consumer protection is related to that. And I just think that's one of those ones that you individually, you dissect and you look at and you move forward with your recommendations accordingly. But I think that's hard. It's a hard hat to wear. And then you've got the hat that you wear outside of this that we'll talk about in just a second. Right now, this is the second. So we think about the hat that you wear, and again, this is Chair Kesner has really drilled this into me, of what hat do you wear when you're outside of this room, right? Because you are a member of this committee, and people know that. And it carries a weight with it. It's important what you're doing. You're making huge recommendations on essentially all functions of this industry, right? We just looked at that list. So I always want to caution about what that can mean for you out in the public world, right? So speaking in favor or against certain companies or business practices can result in perceived favoritism, right? So if, I'm gonna pick on Bruce, if Bruce is like, gosh, I love Lee Warren Inspections. I don't think that's actually the name of your company, but they are the best. There's no one better. You should never use anyone but Lee Warren Inspections. Without a doubt, they're the only good ones out there. Okay, right? That is that's going to be a perceived favoritism. You are speaking out and you are saying this is the way to go. The opposite side of that is Lee Warren Inspections, the worst. Like, I would never use them. They're so terrible. They are ruining the industry, etc. Again, that's not a real company. I'm just picking on people. Lee can take it.
We went from fiction to fact.
Right, there you go.
I like how that transition
Exactly.
happened.
I was gonna leave it alone.
And so what does that mean for you when you serve in this role? Sometimes you have in your signature block that you're on this committee, things like that. So you want to think about that. I think that's especially true. Business practices is a hard one because I think new business practices can get frustrating, right? And we always just want to be mindful of, like, are we talking about this from a business practice standpoint, or talking about it from consumer protection standpoint, and what are we saying out in the public? So, with that, you can lose the trust of both the consumer and the regulated industries. I think this group has a really good reputation from what I can tell with the industry, and so you just want to maintain that as a member of it. And then also, this is the thing. If you say something and you end up in court, you know who won't be there with you? Me. But I will be thinking of you. If you say something, if you really go against someone and you're out serving on this committee, I think you're at a heightened liability level. And I don't want any of you to end up in court unless you're getting paid to be there. So that's my advice to you. Don't worry, this is almost over. But I do want to talk about a few things that I am always talking about. And there's a reason I'm always talking about these things, because this is what we do. The first two are pretty important. So we've got the governor's letter from 2019 asking licensing agencies to reduce barriers to entry. I have been given a lot of ribbing this last week because I said that I read this letter about every 3 months and I have it saved to my desk. Well, that's true, everybody. I'm looking at all of you make fun of me. But I do, because that letter is actually super important. That is direction that we have received from the governor. We're a member of the executive branch, and he's asking us to reduce barriers to entry, and he lays out a few different areas in which we can do that. Does that mean anyone can get a license without anything? No, certainly not. And I never want it to seem like there can't be discussion about things, but I'm always gonna bring it up because it's always gonna be the thing that gets asked about. And so, there's certainly an opportunity to make recommendations. I know we're bouncing around some right now, and I don't mean to dissuade from that, I just mean to remind, hey, take a look at that letter. What does that letter cover, and what doesn't it cover, right? And so I think that's important. Like I said, I have to go back and reread it, because it covers a lot. And that's why I bring it up. It's important to this group as they make the recommendations. Similarly, Regulatory Compliance Division of the Governor's Office, anytime there's a rule that gets proposed that increases, that affects the marketplace, is how they say it. And I think there's a pretty broad, for just in my feelings, I think that's pretty broad. And it's in place because of that dental board case. But I think importantly to this group, and all, the agency as a whole is, if Regulatory Compliance Division is involved in the rulemaking, and we'll send rules to them, but also they look at all the rules that go out there and they'll let us know if they think we missed not sending it to them. And there's been one where I was like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And they'll let us know and they'll say, hey, can we look at this? Or they'll do a little bit of a pre-look at it and ask us some questions to see if it impacts it. We can't adopt a rule that's within their sort of purview unless we have their approval. And I think you guys actually went through that more than any other group with the education rules, right? There was a lot of back and forth on that. And so, that's an important component too that comes in, there's an extra layer there. And then I'm always gonna talk about statutory restraints and rulemaking. Statutory changes a lot harder to affect for all of the reasons, right? That's the legislature. Not impossible, but I think that's always a bigger discussion. And then rulemaking, which is something that we can do if we have the authority to do it. And so we're always gonna dig into that. Do we have the authority on this? What would this look like? What other rules would it impact? So those are our big talking points. I'm not gonna do all of the questions here, but I am going to law school it a little bit. This is like my revenge on myself, because I hated being called on out of nowhere. But, so for example, Bruce, why did you choose to serve on the inspector committee?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh. Why? I think I can help the industry and to serve the consumer a little bit better than what they're doing.
That's great. So Lee, is your understanding of how the inspector committee works different now than it was when you started?
Of course, I mean, when I started, I had no idea how it worked. All I thought was that committee makes all the rules and, it is what it is. But no, I mean, once you get in, start getting into the nuts and bolts, you start realizing there's a lot of moving parts that you don't see from that side, which is always interesting because we get the feedback on stuff. Like we got a bunch of feedback, for this meeting, and you start reading through it. It's like, obviously a lot of these are people that have never been to a meeting and don't know how this works and realize we've already had these discussions, So it's a little frustrating when you've been on here and you see that, but you have to remember that I was that guy who had those same bugs before too, so.
A little bit of the nature of the beast, right?
Yep.
Great. Okay. I'm gonna ask public member Keisha, what was the most surprising part of joining inspector committee? And Brian, I'm gonna ask you too.
I'm glad I get to go second.
Yeah.
She looks better.
It's a lot of moving parts. It kind of reminds me of when I was in the military, and you see the top part of it, but you don't see what the layers underneath. It's lots of layers, like tiramisu or something like that. It's a lot of moving parts.
Sounds delicious.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Keisha routinely brings up food in our meetings, which I appreciate. I love it. Okay, Brian.
Sort of to what both of them had already said about how much stuff goes on before the rules actually come out of this group, that I was quite surprised how much back and forth before we ever do anything actually occurs.
Yeah.
So.
For sure. It's not an easy, simple process. Okay, so I will ask Sean, get ready to unmute.
All right, here I am.
Has serving as an advisory committee member and as chair, which I think is an interesting perspective too, changed your perspective on TREIC?
Yeah, most definitely. Just, as a licensee, just not having much to do with TREIC before, it was always kind of like the big bad wolf, like these guys are out to get us. These guys are, always trying to make our world difficult and stuff like that. And then being a part of this and just seeing everything that goes on really has changed my perspective on, what all the thought that goes into making some of these rules and making some of these changes. And that just my experiences with staff has been great. Tony's been a big help when we did the SOPs and stuff like that. I've just never had any bad experiences and really see, the purpose of all this. So, yeah.
We try and keep the wolves in enforcement.
Yeah, exactly. Even enforcement's been good to work with.
Yeah, I know. No, I'm giving enforcement a hard time, although now their new mascot is probably gonna be a wolf. Okay, I'm not gonna ask best advice for new members because we don't have any right now. But does anybody else want to answer how any of these questions? You can also say no, stop talking.
Just engage early, engage often.
Open mind.
Yeah.
You gotta be two people at the same time, consumer and business. You gotta look at everything two different ways and then stop and reverse yourself again. So playing devil's advocate in your mind is the hardest thing to do because you think of one way, but then you have to start thinking of everybody else's option and opinion.
I think for me, the public members is just, don't be afraid to ask questions right off the bat. You can't be, as a public member, you can't be expected to know all the little stupid intricacies of what we do. So if you don't know, don't think it's a stupid question, just ask, because there may be somebody else at the table that doesn't know. And for the inspector members that come in that are new, if you got an agenda, let it go before you come on here. And I think that has happened in the past. If you have, I am going to do, and you have this first thing set in mind, because you're not going to see the other 10 things that are going on around you. So if you have an agenda, when you get on here, you got to let it go before you start.
Over opinionated.
No, I think that is great. It's kind of like whenever I make myself, I'm gonna get this one thing done today, like that's not gonna happen. That one thing is not gonna get done. But I think you're right. I think that's really good advice. Okay, well, cool. If you have any feedback, if you want me to add stuff, this is an ever evolving training that we'll get to do every January. But I hope it's good, and I think it also helps a little bit of, this group is very conversational, so I worry less. There's a lot of, I love when you guys give each other a hard time. But you also, I have a little bit, I say it on my personal feelings, I have a little bit of affection for this group. And that's all you get. But
Just a little bit.
just a tiny smidge of affection. No, but I do appreciate it, and hopefully it gets the group moving, and we've got some good stuff to talk about today. So I would hopefully have nothing more to say for the rest of the meeting.
Question. All right. Thank
Oh,
you,
wait.
Les.
We have a question.
Okay, perfect.
Always one striker.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there, is there a discussion on the difference between an advisory committee and other committees that actually make decisions? Because this committee has been both. It was a different kind and then it was changed to advisory. And I think a lot of people in the field don't realize it's an advisory committee. I mean, we have a lot of influence on what happens, but ultimately it's not us.
Right, that's right. I think that's a great point. This committee has different origins than the others, right? So it shifted a little bit in what it does, and it makes those recommendations. And maybe that's something that we can get out from an education standpoint of, who is the inspector committee and what do they do? And what are those recommendations? They make those recommendations to the full commission, the commission backs it forth. So yeah, that's great. I love that.
I mean, and there's, people in the field, some know that, and they know that we're just kind of salmon swimming upstream most of the time, and we can't do a whole lot because it's
Like
it's
your
the
knowledge.
it's the commission that actually makes the decisions.
Right.
And, there's that feeling that, we're just fighting a battle we'll never win, but they don't realize that we are able to do a lot of things and affect changes.
To that point, we have talked a lot recently about kind of every piece of kind of the democratic process within TREC. And the advisory committees are an important piece. Any rule related to inspectors is gonna come through this group. And so a recommendation from this group has significant power in front of the commission. Similarly, if one commissioner has an idea or an agenda or an opinion, that doesn't have effect over TREC unless the majority of the commissioners do when they vote on that. Every one of us has kind of a piece of the pie in terms of influence, and also has an appropriate check to that influence, so that there's no single human who can, drive the whole thing.
Well, there's definitely a disconnect, because there's been times where we've gone through and spent months, if not a couple of years on something. We go through, we get it, forwarded to the commission, and then all of a sudden at the commission hearing, then people come out of the woodwork and go, oh no, but what if we did this, and now want to make little small changes, not realizing the nuts and bolts would have been done for the last couple of years.
And we can help with that. I think a lot of the disconnect there is one of communication, to make sure that those in the field understand the pieces, the appropriate avenues to make comments, so that it's not too late.
Yes.
Well, and I think I'm working too on, what do we do with these recommendations once they're made, right? Like, what is because sometimes those reports get made and then it's like, okay, I don't know, are we doing something? So we're really trying to digest a lot more of these advisory committee recommendations in workshop. And walk through them and talk about them, and I think that is super helpful. So that's been something I've been trying to do, is take those recommendations and have them be talked about in more detail level with the commission, right? So they understand everything that went into it, and you've got liaisons who are pretty actively engaged, but I think that's another component to it, is that
It's easy when it's a rule, but when it's not a rule and some other kind
Yes.
of piece of policy, like what happens?
Yes, right, the rules have a little bit of their own, system, but that's helpful, thank you, everybody.
All right, sounds good. Item number 7, do we have any comments from visitors? Is there any written comments or anything? I know we have some in some of the other sections, but non-agenda items.
We're looking around the room, it doesn't look like it.
Did
Okay.
you send this one?
I just realized I had, thank you.
You could put it in the chat.
Sean, we're gonna send you one that we have
Can you send it?
received.
Or do you
Yeah, I
mind
can
sending
forward
it
it
to
to
me?
We're also gonna put it up on the screen, but it's for later.
On item 11.
Yeah.
We got last night.
Okay, all right, yeah, I know there were some other comments though.
Yeah.
On agenda items.
Right.
Okay, all right. Item number 8, election of officers.
You want to go? Or you want me to?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. Sean, before we do this, I just, since this is sort of election season for a lot of these groups, we came up with, looking at Robert rules, just so we're making sure that we're doing this properly. So I just
Okay.
want to read 2 bullet points real quick, if that's okay.
Yeah,
So for each position, you're going to call for a nomination. The nominations do not need to be seconded, and a person can nominate themselves, and then there's a vote. And for each position, you take a vote on each nominee in the order. So if there's multiple nominees, you would take a vote on each one in the order. Once the nominee receives a majority, no further votes need to be taken on the office. So if the first person were to receive a majority, then you don't take up a vote on the second nomination.
okay, perfect.
So we need to do it for each position.
Okay, all right, so we'll start with chair. Does anybody want to nominate themselves, or is there any nominations for the position of chair? Not everybody raise their hand at once.
All right, I'll nominate myself.
What did you say?
Lee nominated himself.
Okay, all right, Lee's nominating himself. Anybody else want to nominate themselves or nominate someone else? So do we need to take a vote, Tony?
Hold on a second.
This is a consent, or this is no, right?
Yeah.
There's no. We have the Robert's Rules Book Club, guys, we've met once.
So we don't need to take a vote? or-
We don't need to take a
Okay.
vote, because you just got the one.
Okay, so no, we do not need to take a vote on that position. So Lee is the duly elected chair.
All right. Lee, I will turn the reins over to you, let you finish up.
Nice handout, Tony.
Smooth transition.
Quick. All right, entertain nominations for vice chair. Does everybody speak at once?
I nominate. Let's see if anybody else wants to volunteer first.
All right.
You gotta
What-
say
what-
it.
wait,
I got
yeah,
it. It's
these-
gotta come from
Go ahead.
the committee.
Yeah.
Vice chair. I'll do it again. I'll nominate myself.
All right.
I was gonna say it.
I was waiting.
Scott.
You're going, wait.
Scott Regan has nominated himself. Any other nominations? We will have that as our vice chair. Entertain nominations for secretary.
I'll volunteer.
I believe that is Steve Reinhardt nominating himself.
Next.
Any other nominations for secretary? Steve Reinhardt stands approved as secretary. All
Or
right,
December, I guess.
reports from subcommittees. Education subcommittee, I guess that's me. Most of what we had on our meeting is gonna be talked about later on, so I don't wanna go too much into that, because it'll just be redoing. I don't think there's anything that we really talked about in our subcommittee that isn't already on this agenda, right?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I'll just leave that for the future items and do it that way. Standards of practice subcommittee.
Oh, well, we didn't meet, we haven't met lately because we're just finalizing what's gonna be in the end of the meeting about the check boxes.
Yeah, that one's coming up.
Yeah, that one's coming up, so we're good.
Something that isn't in here, but I think should be, is we have to reorganize the subcommittees, do we not? At this meeting?
Yes, I mean, you can do it, you can do it now or you can do it later.
Here, let's just go ahead and get that knocked out. We have the current people that are on the two subcommittees. The only exception will be that I can no longer be on, our chair of the education subcommittee, we need another chair. And Sean, are you willing to sit on education subcommittee?
Yes.
Sit on it or chair.
Well, I was starting with one step.
Yes, I'm willing to.
Would you be willing to chair that subcommittee? I know you got a lot going on, but I don't know if that's something you're okay with, but.
Yeah, I'll have to get with you and get caught up on everything, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So Sean is the chair of the education subcommittee with the same members, and you're the chair of SOP, right?
Yes, sir.
You want to stay chair SOP?
Stop. Not with my changes happening next week.
No, not chair? Still be on it, but not
I'll
chair?
still be on it, but not
Okay.
chair.
Who are the?
I'll pull that up.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah.
Oh, this one?
The SOP. Thank you. So it's Scott, Steve, is Dave on that one?
Yes.
And I think,
Brian.
and Brian is also on it.
Okay. Mr. Morgan, would you be willing to chair up the SOP committee?
He's not,
I'm
he's
not
not
on it.
currently
He's
on.
not?
it.
No, he's on
Steve-
education.
Steve-
Oh, God bless
That's
him.
Steve, Scott, Brian, and Dave Motley.
Okay. Steve, you want to chair that up for your final 2 or 3 years?
Yes.
Chair the.
Pretty easy.
Right. Other than that, Everybody okay with just leaving the same members on the same subcommittees? Anybody?
Feels like we're just getting started with
I know.
it, so no need to change.
All right, I just want to make sure if there was anybody who wanted to change or had a desire to shift around, to get that opportunity. Okay. All right, moving right along. Staff reports, executive division.
Okay, I'll start us and then pass it to Tony. I want to mention just a few things. First, I thought of something during Vanessa's training in talking about roles and why staff are in this room. And the one collection of people we didn't really mention is Tony and myself. And we are part of staff. We have some subject matter expertise, but that's not really what we do. We administer the daily tasks of the agency, so oversee the subject matter experts and make sure we're running efficiently, hire and fire and all those good things. But, I report to the 9-member commission. They do my performance evaluation in public, and it's a very enjoyable process. But I think it's kind of an interesting dynamic, and I think it's going really well now, but me as administrator and them as policymakers. And we say that a lot because, just like Vanessa mentioned, we do not have, there's no room for me or any other member of our staff to have a personal position really on something. We implement the desires of the commission, and you advise them on what they convey in terms of what those desires are, right? So if ever you see an aspect of how the agency is running that you don't like, or that you like, or that you have an opinion on, I would love for you to provide that insight to me so that I can ensure that we're doing that well. It's important to me that we serve the industry well, that we serve license holders, and that we also serve consumers well, and that we perform well for the commission. But there is a distinction. We are staff and we implement. That's what we do. Let's see. One thing that I want to mention that's just really exciting in the life of TREIC, and that is that we finally, took a long time, but we finally signed a contract with a vendor named Acela. And they are who we are working with for a new back-end licensing and regulatory system that will affect everything we do in the agency. Right now, we have a system that we call Versa, and it does everything from log fines and fees. Every phone call that comes into the agency from our contact center is logged into the Versa system. All of our licensing information. It produces letters notifying people of when it's time to renew. It's really kind of the locomotive that we rely upon, and it's old. And so Acela will be helping us with a new database. So I approved a purchase for $3.4 million the other day. It's the biggest approval I've ever done. The commission approved that contract at 2 meetings ago, and just delegated the final signature to me, which I've recently done. But that's going to be the project of this year for the agency. It'll take about 15 to 18 months of this year and beyond, really. Last year, we had initiatives that we asked the commission for. How do you want us to spend our time? And they came up with a laundry list. This year, our initiatives are the legislative session and then the Acela contract, the implementation of that new system. So I just wanted you to know about that. That will be significant in the life of the agency for all staff. Every division will be involved. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is that we are now in our 2nd year of kind of a change in how we do communications for the agency, with a focus on quality instead of quantity, for sure. And that focus came as we hired Summer Mandel as our communications director. You can expect some additional improvements in the coming year that I'm really excited about. I think we'll have additional bandwidth to just send out more and to communicate more with our license holders that I think will be really good. If you have any feedback on how that's going, please just let me know. It occurred to me that y'all might not know how to get a hold of me, like directly, if you have any feedback you want to give. So I'm gonna give you my cell phone number so that you can call me. I don't always answer it, but I do return calls.
The disclaimer already for when I go. I don't always answer.
Yeah, if your name is Lee Warren,
I
you go
don't
straight
answer
to
the call.
voicemail. Yes, okay. 512-970-2140. Make sure you know how to just provide me with feedback on how we can improve, what we're doing well on, anything you think I need to know. That's okay. It's an umbrella. I'm not scared. Okay, that's all I have. Tony, you wanna?
Yeah, I just had a couple of things, yeah. I don't think you mentioned this, I zoned out briefly, so, about the walk and talk.
Oh, I mentioned it. I'm kidding.
Okay.
You didn't.
So, I just want to mention, going to the communication thing, that if you guys recall, the walk and talk issue was an issue this committee had dealt with, over a couple of meetings, and we had initially drafted an article about it, but, pulled back to get some additional feedback. Anyway, that, at the last committee, you asked staff to move forward on that, so, Summer's drafted something, we're currently in the process of reviewing it, that should likely go out in the next week or so. And there's been a slight, excuse me, a slight change in focus. It's focusing on not only the prohibition on inspectors, but also a new kind of target on what consumers need to know about it as well. So we'll, sorry, excuse me, we'll be targeting or having that out in the next week or so. Any questions about that? Okay, good. Anything you want to add, Son?
You got it.
Thanks. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that the legislative session has started. There's an agenda item later on the agenda that I'll be addressing, just what inspector-related stuff has been filed or what we're expecting. But just to let you know that that is going on. And then the final thing I wanted to mention is that Mike Malloy and I are going to be attending the TREIC conference this weekend. We'll be at a vendor booth there to answer any questions to the attendees. We've done it in the past. We haven't done it in a while, but we have done it in the past, so we'll be there for that as well. Just
So you'll be there all day Friday?
all day Friday, yeah.
Wait, not
So,
Saturday.
right. So that's all I have.
All right, Enforcement Division.
Good morning, Tony Venturia, staff attorney and liaison to the inspector committee. As you can see, we have 5 disciplinary orders that we issued since the last committee meeting. Every member of the inspector committee should be getting a copy when they're published. If you're not getting a copy, please let us know so that maybe you're not added to the inspector committee list so that we can add you. But if you have any questions, just let me know.
Yes, sir.
I forgot to mention something that was important, and I apologize.
Not worried, have to, so. Not bad.
So if you all recall, there were some rules that the committee had acted on to put before the commission that got pulled aside with a bunch of other rules from the commission by some input on the governor's office. Those, in fact, will be moving forward at the February meeting. And just to remind the committee what that was, there's the rule review rules, which those were held off on. So all the non-substantive changes and cleanup that was done for that will be part of that. There was the change of 535-222, which was if an inspection is paid for prior to the inspection, that the inspector is required to provide the report 2 days after the completion of the inspection report. So that one will also move through. And then there was there's a rule that changes the expiry process. If you recall, one of the things inspectors can currently do is they can what we call the look back. So if they've expired, they can renew without any lapse in active status, so long as their sponsoring inspector, supervising inspector signs off on that, and you guys wanted that removed, so that rule will also be going forward. So all of those, the committee's already addressed. I just wanted to remind you that they've been held up on and they will be before the commission.
Finally marching forward.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
All right, Education and Examinations Division.
Okay, Jen Wheeler, Director of Education and Exams. The first thing that I want to remind everybody of is CE credit for in-person attendance of this meeting. So for those of you who hold a license, an inspector license, and you're here in person with us, and you were here when the meeting was called to order at exactly 10 o'clock today, very well done. There is a sign-in sheet over by the door for you to be eligible, to be able to sign a roster, so that, depending on how long the meeting goes, you can receive up to 4 hours of CE credit, up to 4 hours or the length of the meeting. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
In person,
In person only.
not online.
That's
Okay.
correct.
That's per renewal period, right?
For renewal period.
One term.
Yep.
Minimum 4 per year.
Max.
Max.
Max 4 per
I
renewal,
said minimum, so
not per year.
Right.
keep going. She can keep going, he be quiet.
The numbers for education, our courses and, qualifying courses, CE courses, provider applications are included in your materials. Nothing particularly noteworthy. Our inspector CE courses are staying pretty consistent. We haven't had a lot of activity in the qualifying courses, but that's because, as you all know, you just developed this new qualifying education program. So everybody who's going to offer those courses has submitted those to us, and they've already been approved. Those receive a 4-year approval term, so we likely won't see another, big swing for a couple more years, other than maybe the onset of some new education providers. So yeah, no surprises in terms of education numbers. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any on that, on these reports.
The renewals of providers seems to be taking a little longer.
Yes, they are. We've just hired 2 new people.
Okay.
They're gonna start on February 1st. Our volume has increased on the real estate side pretty significantly. We discovered a 25% increase in the last fiscal year over year in the CE course applications. We've had a little bit of turnover, and so, just kind of coupled with training new people, the processes are taking a little bit longer.
It's looking up though.
It's looking up for sure. We've hired 2 people who I think are really well qualified and well suited. This will increase our staff permanently.
Okay.
So like I said, those people will start on February 1st.
So one of the concerns that I have is kind of on a personal one, but it's also just for that. So I submitted my provider renewal over 2 months ago and still waiting for that. Now I'm the OCD type because I know it expires the end of February, so I'm like way ahead trying to do it
Sure.
on the early side. But my concern is if somebody is expiring same time as me and they're like, oh, and they put it in now, how long is it gonna take? Are they going to end up expiring before
No, once
that's the case?
we have a kind of a buffer built in there, so once the application is received, the first thing we do in our process is open up that application, which will prevent it from expiring.
Okay.
Does that make sense? It's
Okay.
kind of it's just a programmatic thing. Go in, open up the renewal application, and the expire won't occur.
So is there something that gets sent back to the applicants that lets them know that they're grandfathered in, so to speak, because they've submitted their paperwork? How do they know that?
Do we have a
When we receive your application, you should be getting an email saying that it was received. And if you are expiring, what's considered a timely renewal, so you can still operate as usual, even though on paper you may be expired, you've already submitted your app, so you can still conduct.
But is there something in that, what comes back that says if you don't have your formal acceptance from the board, that you are grandfathered in that acceptance? Because I know when you apply, you get the email that comes back that says we got it. But does it say what you just said, that if you don't have the formal process through from the committee, you're still eligible to work?
It is I'll look and see, but I think it's on that template, yeah.
Okay.
Because the staff that, as soon as he gets the app, he turns around and automatically sends that. I'll look at it and see, but it should be on there. If not, we'll add it.
Yeah, as long as that,
We always
as long as
try
that
to-
can be clear, just in case. As
Yeah,
long
we
as they get it
always-
in on time, we just want to make
Right.
sure people aren't, cutting off their. Okay.
Yeah, no,
And we-
that's a great
we do get
recommendation.
I'm sorry, and we do get inquiries from students that may call in and ask about the school, and we always tell them that the school is still valid. It hasn't expired, because we know we received that application already.
Well, I noticed on the website it's changed. Now you can actually look up by provider. It used to be if I pulled up my license number, I could see the licenses and my provider under there. Now, if I pull up my license, my providership does not show up. I have to specifically do a search for providers
By the
and then it
provider.
shows up, which kind of throws people off. If they were looking for a provider under somebody's license, it no longer shows up under that license.
Under your professional inspector license?
Or my broker, either one.
Yeah, it used to be, like, mine would say the inspector, it would actually say the education provider, and then below it's inspector. Lee's saying it would show that his broker's license, the education license, and then the inspector.
And now the education part is out. You have to look for it
That
completely
changed
separate.
last year.
Yeah, it doesn't show up
That's
anymore.
interesting.
So
Okay.
when they do a search for, okay, so somebody looks up Lee Orr or Scott Regan, it only shows just the
Your-
TREIC license.
Right.
Right, doesn't show the providership
Everything
that's
with
attached.
Everything
to the
else is if
exclusion
you
of a
try-
provider license.
Because they call up and go, I don't see that you're a provider.
Right.
That's the calls that we're
So
getting.
you have to do the pull down for.
You gotta go to CE, then you gotta go to the inspector, and then you gotta go to that school, and then it tells you what the number is, and then you have to search the
So
number
you,
to see who the CE provider is.
you
So-
should be able to enter
Nope.
the your CE provider number under the education
It'll bring up the
license side.
school, look at
And
it,
it
because
would
it
bring
brings
up
up
the
the
school.
school, it doesn't say who that provider is.
It's a 2 or 3 step thing.
Yeah, and that's just changed in the last year.
Yeah, because people call up and go, well, you're not listed as the provider for the school.
Right.
Because you actually have, I don't know, all your advertising, you have to list your provider number and your name.
Are you, this is just a question, is it possible that you're thinking of the instructor license versus the
No,
provider
each
license?
provider, it says who the provider is.
So this is gonna be a real stupid question. There's a difference between the provider and the school? Aren't those one and the same?
They are,
The school, but it says
but I
that
think,
school, that Scott Regan is with that license.
So-
And that all changed because when it comes down to is, I got called saying that I'm gonna file on you because you're not putting Texas Real Estate Education, Scott, well, I put it Scott Regan and then I have my provider number after it. That's how I've always done my advertising. And this just came about, and that's what Lee was talking about, is I got somebody saying, I'm filing a complaint on you. I'm like, go ahead, it's not my fault that the system changed. I'm following the original rules that were set forth by TREIC.
Do you own the school?
Yes,
You own the school?
yes.
Okay, interesting. Let's talk offline on that,
Yeah,
'cause this is
same-
weird.
Same with Lee,
Okay.
and the same thing actually happened to
Interesting.
another couple people, because they're calling me
It
going,
shows professional, the 2 licenses, and it shows the history, but it doesn't show any of the providers she used to.
so I feel like I understand what you're saying, I actually just don't recall a time where you could enter your professional inspector license and pull up
it pulls up everything.
per that license number, your CE provider.
Right,
Yeah.
but see, now I pull up the actual provider number,
Right,
and my name is nowhere in there,
No, it just says the company name.
just as the company.
It doesn't say who that license is registered to.
Actually, it doesn't even say the company, or yeah. it's on
well, it
there,
does,
But it doesn't
right.
say.
And it's got the
then-
contact
Because each
information.
company has to
Okay.
have, what they call is, it's actually listed as the principal to the company.
Right.
There's another form that
Right.
correlates with that.
Right,
And then you can list multiple principals. That doesn't matter. It's, each license has to have somebody's name that goes with it, and that all just seemed to go away.
Yeah, it doesn't show
Sure.
a name, it doesn't show a name.
We can
or
look at
anything.
that.
If I click on the company name, it takes me to my website.
yeah,
Which is great.
What
It's
is
great,
it?
I agree.
but it doesn't have a name on there, so like in his situation, what they're saying, it's like your stuff isn't listed, you gotta click 3 or 4 different times, go through multiple different pages.
So I actually had to go find it and find my license and actually send it to another school provider to show that it was there, and actually did a screenshot of how I did it, and
So what I'm hearing is that, you would like for the website to display the owner's name, the,
Principal.
whoever that license is registered, because you have a business, and it actually says who is the
You have the
operational?
operations manager, and you
That's
have the
the-
records manager, and then.
But you actually, the application says, who is this license gonna be? Who is going to be, who's responsible? And
Okay.
you actually, there's another question, who's gonna be doing the, who's
Records
responsible?
management.
Yes.
Right,
And
yeah.
And that's what the licensed registers, and you verify that they have the experience to actually do, to be a CE provider.
Okay.
So,
Hey, on Scott, yours doesn't show your name at all, because when I pull up mine, it says the school name, and it says alternate name, and it has my name.
no,
Yeah,
Well, that would
Lee's
be-
doesn't either.
mine doesn't either. All it shows is an address, a mailing address.
No,
And for a
it-
consumer
yeah.
side, that's not
He did it as,
adequate.
Okay,
I
He
think
did
we would
an
have to
alternate
circle,
he did it as, like, we're an LLC, and he did it as DBA,
Right.
because that's the alternate
Which would
name,
be
and
an
that's why I
alternate
pulled up
name.
his name.
Gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I feel like I have the information I need to
Cool.
research
Like I said,
and
that was
get
just some
back
of
to
the
you.
I was
changes last
curious
year.
if it was just a change, because that's when they actually, where you would actually go to that company and click it, it would forward you to our website.
Right,
And I was like, okay, well, that's okay, because my website says everything in there,
right,
that's supposed to be there.
okay.
Apologize for the interruption, but.
No, that's okay, that's good feedback, and I'll circle back.
Sure.
The only other thing I wanted to mention was our writing group has been formed to update the inspector SOP legal and ethics course. And we met for the first time last week, and we are meeting in person after this meeting today. So, we'll be working on the items that need to be updated, anything in there, SOPs that need to be updated. We plan to add new scenarios and just give it a brand new, fresh look, fresh info. And so as you know, those materials come before this committee, before they go before the commission. So we can look forward to seeing those in the coming months.
That'll probably coming pretty quick, probably by the next, well, because we gotta get that going for the
That's right.
September pool.
And that's all.
All right.
Thank you.
Denise?
Good morning, Denise Sample, Licensing Director, for the record. So the first report, or the section of reports I have here are through November 30th, fiscal year 22. Fiscal year 23 is what we're in, but this is through November of 22. So the first slide on the bottom left corner shows the year-to-date comparison of inspector applications. And so these are 2 years that did not have the requirements change. Previously, when I was reporting, we were pulling back 2 years prior because we had that large influx ahead of the requirements changing and received a record number of applications, but fiscal year 22 and now fiscal year 23 are normal, I'll call them normal years. We're not anticipating any additional requirements changes, so we've got we don't have that variant impacting our application numbers. But we are still slightly down on the professional inspector applications. We just continue to monitor that with each reporting month. The next page shows the licensing renewal activity, and the inspectors are over on the right-hand side. You'll see that the renewal numbers are actually higher, and that's due to a larger number of license holders. But the percentages are holding pretty steady. There's no dip in the renewal rate among the professional inspectors. That's what we usually watch. There aren't a lot of apprentice inspectors that hold on to it, but renewal rate has always been kind of low for apprentices. They just don't tend to hold on to it. They're either upgrading, or they're usually upgrading to another license. The next page of the report is the license holder count, and you'll see a 13-month comparison. The inspectors are kind of in the center of the table of numbers there. So we ended November 22 with 4,952 total licensed inspectors. The next page shows the graphs broken down by license type. And then the last page of my report is average number of calendar days to process a license application. So you'll see inspectors in the center of each one of those tables. We process professional inspector applications on an average of about a little over 7 calendar days. So a good turnaround. When you see numbers of NA for real estate and apprentice, that indicates that there weren't any of those types of applications that were considered completed within that reporting month. So if we had some that came in at the very end of October, or they came in at the very end of November, they're just perhaps not complete, they'll be reflected in the next, month or whenever they're categorized as review completed. So this is, just as a reminder, this is the amount of time it takes the licensing team to review documents related to an application and provide a response to an applicant. That concludes my report. The only other item I wanted to provide an update on is putting professional inspector applications online. I know the executive director reported on signing a contract on a new system. We still have, we've been working on putting the professional inspector initial application online. That's what I'll call in the hopper. It's a technical term. We've done some preliminary testing on that application. As you all, as a committee, are familiar with, we've got that statutory requirement where we cannot collect the recovery fund fee until after the exam has been passed. So it just adds another kind of layer of complexity to the testing, but we are moving forward with that and working with the IT team to hopefully have that available online in the next, to be conservative, hopefully by your next meeting, we'll have an update on that.
Do you have kind of a written protocol other than the website on how we're testing the tests separately? Because I ran into one of my apprentices that was doing the national test first and is later scheduled for the national test actually next Tuesday. And then he'll be studying for the state module. And there was some confusion because the only protocol on the website is turning in all those things and doing them all at one time. And it was kind of verbally from staff how to do it, and it eventually worked. But, so the question is, what do you turn in if you're just going to take the national first and then do the state later? Those things that get turned in, do they get turned in with the first application or the second?
Well, it's only one application, so I think that's part of the confusion that can arise is there are plenty of applicants who elect to complete all of the coursework and take both portions, both exams, all in one shot. So when we're processing it, it really depends on what kind of documents we get with the application.
So the only way
they
you
don't
know
have
is
to-
if they only send in the 3 modules for the national, you just assume
We
they're
authorize
asking
them.
for the national.
Well, at that point, they've only qualified to sit for the national exam. So we'll send that authorization and, what we call a curative letter that says, you've been authorized for this exam, you'll need, the other coursework to sit for the state exam.
So when he finishes the other ones, sends another application with those? or
Not
just
another application, but just the course materials, the
Just
course
the-
completion documents.
Just send the course materials, and you'll associate that with, you won't look at it going, where's the application? You'll
No.
associate it with historically and find the application from a month or two ago.
Right, because the first thing we do when we get any kind of documentation from anyone is look them up in the system. What's pending, what's open, what does this relate to, if they didn't include the letter that we've sent. So we do always ask them to include a copy of any letter that we've sent when we ask for additional information or even with the exam authorization. But if we don't get it, we have a way to look that up and tie it to the application.
And are the fees different because you're setting twice?
You would pay the exam fee twice if you're taking the exams separately.
I do think Steve made a valid point about the website. I do think there's probably a way to make that a little bit clearer on the website in terms of people who do choose to.
It doesn't appear that it's.
It doesn't
an option.
speak to it.
Yeah, what I can do is work with Summer and see if there's a way, I know in the past when we had what we all lovingly refer to as the 3-tier system to get licensed, there were PDFs attached that had tables and kind of a flow chart because it was a much more complicated process. So I can definitely pick Summer's brain about that. I'm sure she'd have some great ideas on how to display that in a way that's not overwhelming either.
Yeah, because there are certain things that go in with it. One was the application, the fee, and then it talks about the background and everything. Is it at a different
Fingerprints.
time? Is that at that time too?
And actually because
So
of
did you
how
do that with
long
the first one or the second one?
we typically recommend that the fingerprints get done as early as possible because the background process for the information to come back from DPS and FBI can sometimes take a bit of time. And so to not have any lag time, we typically recommend that. So on all of our become licensed pages, the fingerprint information is featured prominently
Yes.
for that applicant to
But we
avoid any
didn't know whether or
delays.
not to send that with the first application for the national
Well,
or
it's
the second one.
only one application though.
Send it with the second group of papers.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't, but we typically recommend earlier is better because of the delays that can happen with getting the fingerprint information that TREC has no
It's
control
the
over.
one thing that's out of their control.
Right.
Steve, just to, something you mentioned, paying twice. So, yeah, if you want to sit for the national portion first, then you pay for that. And then sit for the state portion, you pay for that. If you choose to take both at the same time, you pay one.
And it's the same fee.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same fee to take 2 tests or 1 test.
Just to clarify.
It costs a little more if you split them up.
Right,
But it helps your brain cells
yes.
because of the overlap in
At least it's an option. It wasn't an option before,
Well,
so.
and it's been there for a year, and I didn't know if anybody had even taken that option before, because maybe a lot of people don't even know it exists.
No, I know.
No, they
people
are.
that have
The
already got it.
providers are communicating that
I've known a
to
few
students.
people that have been training that actually did the same way. When they heard that they had the option, they were like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they actually got really excited and they were like, so what do I do? And I said, get the national out of the way first, then do the state. Because the national is a longer test.
I do think it's important though to talk about the cost as well, because that may be something that somebody would consider. If it costs twice as much to do it that way, they may not want to do that. I just think
Actually,
having, being as transparent.
People aren't
as
worried about
possible.
that. It's studying the material.
No, I get that, but I
Taking
mean, in
one right
terms of
after the other.
transparency, just having all of that out there, I think is helpful for everybody.
I can look at too some, bringing some statistics before you guys, just because like I've got the last quarter in front of me, Pearson View statistics. So the first time pass rate for the national portion of the professional inspector exam for the last quarter was 64%. That's the
Whoa.
first time pass rate. And the state portion is 81%.
That's a,
I don't know if we've ever been over 50.
I know.
So this is just a quarter, you know?
But no, that's still because if you
But-
think about what Steve's saying, we're normally
It's
in the
upper
forties.
Yeah.
I mean,
Now, the
50s
state's
that
been
were
90-ish.
Often less.
often a lot of less, but you know, we got excited when we were seeing 50, 52. It just.
Yeah.
So
I think
it
it's good to
works.
see them separate
And
and
it
seeing the
doesn't,
national and the state. I mean, 81% of the
doesn't
state, that's pretty
separate
telling right there.
those who took just the national versus the
It does not.
women. Because that would be really, I mean, that was the whole justification for
Right.
it, is to
But I think.
be able to study the
It's not
national,
easy
then
from a
flush their
reporting
standards and do
standpoint.
the state.
But I think the
Yeah.
numbers speak for itself, and everybody that I've put through classes and done training with or did other stuff, when you explain to them, yeah, it does cost you twice, but think now you eliminated having to squeeze everything into one day and trying to remember, because you have the national and then the state laws, there is no cross-reference, and everybody that's actually.
There's a bunch of crossover as far as the standards,
Right.
you gotta remember, is that a national, is that a state thing?
Yeah, so there's,
The idea was to, I mean, so my original thought was, the first time pass rate in the 40s was pretty stagnant, been that way for years. And I thought, well, maybe part of that is learning 2 different standards simultaneously.
but I do think the numbers that you just stated show proof that it's actually working.
Yeah, so we can, you know, I'll keep an eye on those.
Thank
So that's one piece. I mean, are people actually passing the test and getting information?
I've-
The second
yeah.
piece, which we can't quantify yet, is it actually producing a better inspector?
But myself and Mike, who teaches with me, is we ask them to notify us when they pass, and they call up and they're like, hey, I got this score, and I'm like, that's a phenomenal score.
Yeah.
So, you know, the scores are going up because they're studying one book of material instead of trying to cram everything into it. And when he came up with that idea, I was like, genius idea, and then they call up and go, so, I was like, decrease for a couple of days and start hitting the books and go ahead and schedule your test and then force you tests. But that's just, I've seen an increase on the education side.
Until you're done with it.
I've seen a large increase on the education side. The scores have gone up. People are okay with it and they don't mind spending the money because it takes the stress out of them.
Mhm.
What I can do is I can work with Jen and our IT department. Maybe there is a way we can take these exam statistics and what my team is processing. We might be able to, I can't guarantee anything, but maybe we can get some sort of percentage and figure out how many are taking it separately and how many are taking it
Sure.
all
It
at
would help
once.
validate.
Because I know we're seeing
what we did.
both on the licensing, from the licensing processing side, we're seeing it always. And so, we just don't have that data, but maybe we can use that exam
Maybe,
statistic. We
yeah,
might be able to work
maybe so.
on something and report back.
our exam vendor
We can
is,
explore it.
Pretty good.
is challenged in terms of trying to separate first time pass rate state versus national
Right.
and the combined, but Denise is right, maybe we can do something,
Just
it together.
Just sorting the applicant with different dates on their tests.
Yeah.
Tells you right there.
We'll look into it.
Yeah.
We'll look into it.
Well, I can tell you that just in the last couple of years and going through this, we've spent more time talking about getting licensed and what happens after and whatnot than we ever have in this committee. A lot of times we tend to, okay, we've already passed the test, let's move on to what we're doing now. So I think it's good. So Denise, kind of looks like on the Asian side, everything, the numbers are starting to crest a little bit as far as.
It's early to tell. The applications are about 7%, a little bit of a dip, but, it's really, we're only talking about 3 months worth of data in the fiscal year.
Right.
So we'll keep watching that.
Expecting to keep increasing pretty steadily, it looks like. All right. Okey doke. We'll move on. Item number 11, discussion of possible action regarding education subcommittee recommendation relating to education requirements for an apprentice inspector license. So this has been a fun topic that we've been discussing and looking at a number of different options. I don't think we actually had an action specifically to go forward on this.
We just put it on the agenda in case you did.
Yeah.
I think you guys talked about maybe some stakeholder input, or, you've got a comment.
Yeah.
Right on one.
So we have, we've been certainly looking at at a number of different, options and possibilities as far as getting, dropping the real estate inspector license. And what, if that's the case, what would we do to the apprentice license, and the possibility of requiring some type of education for that. There was the talk of just an 8-hour SOP course. There was other discussion about possibly increasing it more, or creating a new course for that, because what we currently have may not, fit into the mold of that. So that is something Education Subcommittee is still going to be looking at. Initially, this kind of came up because we were looking at pushing this forward through this legislative session, but it got kind of held back. We want to make sure that if we do it, along with getting rid of the recovery fund, that we do it all at once and do it right, so that we aren't 2 years from now having to go back and redo it again. I don't think it's really hurting anything in its current state, so let's just make sure if we're going to try and, get legislators on our side and get this pushed through and make a statutory change, that it gets done right the first time, and we don't go back to those same legislators 2 years from now and go, hey, we just need to tweak this just a little bit. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. So give the scenario that I'm gonna be an apprentice. I apply for apprentice license. Application goes to licensing division. Once you've gone through and they've checked your background, then you get notified that you need to go get your fingerprints. So all in all, you're looking at, let's see, 20 working days by the time your application gets into where they've already done a background check. So I'm in 100% agreement with what you're saying about these are the things you need to do. Once you've got your background's been approved, you need to get your fingerprints and log into this area, and you can do an online or in person 8-hour legal and ethics class so that they have an idea of laws and regulations, and that an inspect somebody that doesn't know the industry anywhere. I'm gonna hire my wife to come do inspections with actually do. She has a apprentice license. But prime example is if you bring in somebody in that doesn't know anything, I wouldn't feel comfortable for them touching a house unless they have an idea what they're doing. You're walking into somebody's house, that inspector is responsible. If you have done the background and you've done the research and you understand there's laws and regulations what you can and can't do as an apprentice, and there's laws in place that you can do stuff. There's always been a confusion of what you can and can't do as an apprentice. Well, I can leave you there and I can make, no, you have to be on the same property with your inspector at all times. They have to be with you. And that's where we brought that up, because we've heard people going, hey, just start this and I'll be right back. I was like, whoa, time out, stop. That's going way past anything else. But not knowing what anybody's doing, we are the only professional license in the state of Texas. Everybody else has a contract, or they are actually listed in different characters. But being in professional industry, that's where it gets into a lot of it. We are the only industry that actually has, as inspectors, carry more insurance than any other trade in the state of Texas. And we are ranked number 7th in the United States for carrying the most insurance. So I ain't putting somebody in the house unless they do training. That's my opinion. And I'm looking at the business, I'm looking at the inspector, I'm looking at the consumer, and I looked at it every which way. I want to honestly say I was against this to begin with, but after doing it and sitting down and beat myself up over it, I agree there's got to be something done.
And I think those points are certainly what we've been looking at. The other thing, everybody teaches differently, and whoever that person, that sponsoring person, or even the professional that's there, everybody's going to teach SOPs. Everybody has their little hot buttons that they teach. And I think if an apprentice is going to go in as an apprentice, you don't want to go through the full route for whatever
starting to
reason,
work this field.
You at least need to have a base knowledge of what the actual standards are. So if the person that's teaching you says something incorrect, you don't assume that is the way it is, and now you're perpetuating.
Yeah, that little book right there, they need to know what's in it.
Yeah.
That little right
So I think that, and I think part of what we also need to look at is, the current rule is, as an apprentice, you just have to have direct supervision by a professional inspector that has the experience, and inspections under their belt and whatnot, not necessarily their sponsoring inspector.
No, that's a professional, because you can get into a multi-firm that has an inspector that's been with the company for 5+ years. I would send somebody out with them.
Yeah.
That I feel that as I'm sponsoring somebody, and I feel that, yeah, you can do the inspection. You've been with me long enough and I know your background. You could be with that person. So where it says a professional listed, keep it that way, not your sponsoring.
Yeah. So I think, to me, I know there, from the outside looking in, it could look as we're possibly trying to hinder or put a barrier up. To me, it goes right back to what we initially talked about in this training. I mean, to me, this is just black and white consumer protection, to have some type of base knowledge there before we're letting them into consumers' homes. But that's something that is in discussion with the education subcommittee, and will continue, but that we'll see more coming on that in future meetings, I'm sure.
Well, that's a statutory change, so if you get the statutory authority,
right,
then your rulemaking is tied to your authority, so it's that's a little bit of a different ballgame than if we were like, we're gonna make a rule,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because we were talking about, packaging it all together to get rid of the real estate license, and recovery fund, and that type of stuff too, so. Yeah, we've been talking about getting rid of the recovery fund for years.
Well, it was supposed to be there when COVID happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's $10, but still.
It's still.
I paid $100, but I
I know, I get it. All right, anybody else have anything to talk about on that agenda item?
I don't know if you want to talk about the comment we received at all, just to sort of talk about it in the record.
Because it wasn't in the materials.
We received it yesterday.
Yeah. So, one of the comments, just in case people online haven't read, because we have a copy here, is to possibly get rid of the apprentice license and keep the real estate license, just in case. To be honest, I hadn't even looked at that, and it's certainly worth a look. It would kind of eliminate a couple of things that we're talking about.
I actually think he wants to get rid of both. And just have one, and
yeah.
just have a professional inspector.
Yes. One license, one. I got it. I thought he was talking about getting rid of the apprentice and keeping the RI. I'd love to do that on one. I just don't know if I think that would be considered a hindrance into the industry if we were to get rid of both of those sub-licenses.
It'd be statutory change.
Yeah.
So, you'd be up against that battle there, but again, if you get it, you get it.
Yeah. It's certainly worth a look. I think the professional track provides a better educated inspector. But I think there are situations where people may not have the money to pay for all those classes up front and do all that training and everything else.
I personally think you get better educated as an apprentice because you work with somebody for a year,
Yeah.
or, whatever, 6
Well,
months.
you gotta do a minimum 1 year. With your
Yeah,
registration,
you're
you
right.
gotta do your
So,
education.
I mean, we're one of the few
16
licenses that you can just go straight to being professional on your own right off the bat. A lot of them, you have to, appraisers, you have to be, 2 years, I think you have to be under somebody else.
You gotta go through
Yeah.
time and track.
Plumbers, electricians, all that you have to go through it, so.
We're still the highest education required in the state,
Yeah.
United States.
Okay. All right, so get you.
Yeah, the other thing is that it's not on the agenda, but what that the committee did talk about was the form, the practicum form. I just didn't know if you wanted to give an update on that.
Yeah, so the practicum form is still being worked on, and once that is actually done, we'll get that submitted.
It's a feedback form.
Yeah.
When you take the practicum, I'll let Jennifer speak to it.
Sure, so, and it actually, I was just kind of bringing it up because it does, there is a component of this letter that addresses it, but it says that most schools, the claim is that most schools are not actually making the students perform inspections or having them write the inspection reports. That's the concern expressed here, we are addressing that concern. The education subcommittee is by developing a practicum evaluation form. So, in traditional courses, you have a course and instructor evaluation form. The subcommittee has recommended very specific things to be included on a practicum evaluation form to enable us to get this very specific feedback.
On the form that you're technically getting from the field inspector says that they've actually done the 5
It does.
inspections and dates. And the education actually says that they're supposed to perform inspection reports.
And that's part of one of the questions that we asked. Did you actually complete this report?
So.
So you've got the inspector.
I'm gonna,
Has not.
I'm.
I mean, I haven't met anybody that has done reports.
They're supposed to
I don't
report.
meet a lot of them, but they do.
Right.
Okay, so I will say this, and Mike's right behind me repeating the same thing, and I do know with other schools, they have to submit the form. And when they go with us or the other schools, I'm not gonna say all the names, is we're making them do the inspection report. Doesn't matter what the software is. First thing they have to do is a written report, and that's part of the school. You have to print it out and white it out.
Right.
And then they're allowed to use whoever you're training and go through the report. And most of the, I mean, pretty much, you're with me every day, you're gonna do a report with me.
Right.
Is.
Well, and that's what it's required, and that's what the certification on the form.
Well,
The form is kind of set up to where it's I think it's a 2-pronged thing. One, from the student's perspective, did you do all this other stuff? From the education provider's perspective, they're gonna get a copy of this form too. And they're like, oh, well, if my student doesn't say he did the report, now that's gonna look bad when I try to renew my providership, because there's
but there was,
something to
wasn't,
be
where
reflected
I was
on.
getting at, wasn't there talks about submitting forms with reports?
Or just
Paperwork.
archiving them available for
But
inspection.
I think there was a question about a
request.
year
Like
ago,
if they just
why aren't they
archive-
submitting their reports?
They're probably archiving the students' work, or should be.
Should be.
Are they archiving the reports just so in case there was a question?
Well, I think this came up in the education subcommittee meeting, is there a record retention requirement?
Yes.
For those who are leaving, and
What if we were to just require that as part of their submission for their practicum,
That's
that
what-
they supply the reports with it?
But that's what I'm getting at, is that was supposed to be part of it from the beginning when it was changed, is providing the reports, and it never went anywhere. When Steve sat there and did it on the board and wrote it all out, and that's what I'm getting at, because in my mind, I'm over here going, I gotta submit reports for everyone that I sign off on. And that's what I've made them, I'll print this one out and do this.
But
and
if the
do-
rule doesn't reflect that, then maybe that's something you can look at.
That's what I'm saying, if we go back to the rule, I think that was the original intent of the rule.
and so you're saying submit the reports to TREIC
The
with an
minimum of 5
application?
reports stating that they've actually done the
I mean,
report.
it's electronics.
It's part of the.
It's coming as a
practical completion.
PDF on each one, so
Do you
you
do
end up with
anything with
6
them?
pieces of paper.
Well, that's, yeah, and I would
The
want
fact
to
that- the
pull
fact that-
Denise in here.
Then you
That-
grade them?
Well,
Right.
Yes,
what do you
you're
do with
required
them?
to.
I think just the idea that you
Yeah.
have to
No,
turn these in and they're
the
subject to evaluation, I better do it. In the past, I mean, the last few years have been an anomaly because of COVID. Most of this, virtually every student that I've talked to said that their instructor went out, did an inspection, they FaceTime watched them and do the inspections for their practicum. And I said, well, how'd your reports go? So, well, the inspector did the reports too. And I
I've
just
gotten
kinda
those
looked
calls
at
too, but I've never done
and
a
I'm like,
report.
well, that's not the intent, but the virtual practicum training, I don't know the specific. It sounded like it would have been that, hey,
The requirements
you're
were
watching,
specific.
you're watching your instructor do the inspection, but it's hard for them to do a report if they're just kind of watching somebody do something, then you don't.
Report writing is the number one thing that everybody fouls on.
That was a problem, and now that went away, the virtual's gone.
And that was what we just fought in the last 2 meetings.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity
I'm
to
not-
talk to any of the graduates recently to see how well it went, because this is the first time the practicum really being enforced.
Well, and that's, again, one of the reasons I think the education subcommittee is working toward a practicum evaluation form
Yeah.
is to get, more than just the perspective from this group, which is very valuable, but also, perspective across the state, what's happening. And, I think that will give us valuable information.
Going to the first question is, are the reports that they do in their school, they're subject to retaining those documents?
That's what we were gonna look into and come back to the education subcommittee with.
I think if they submit them, I think that's,
I mean, it, like a lot of things, even if they're not reviewed, the idea you're submitting them.
well, we can spot review. I mean, we can.
I was gonna say,
I
there
mean,
has to be some kind of
The
review
education
or.
subcommittee
it's not
can
gonna be-
periodically
I was gonna say.
pick 5 per quarter,
I
to
always
just
thought
pull out
that
of
would be
something
a
and
good
take a look
idea,
at.
is the committees themselves, it doesn't take a minute or two to look through a report.
And know if
I get
it's.
lots of,
It does.
not really. Now, if you're gonna critique it and make
Those
notes,
100-page reports are a different story.
I mean, I like the idea of at a renewal, an inspector sends one of their reports. That way you would
need
catch
to stand up and state.
people still using the old reports.
My name's Tom Langley, turnkey home inspection. I teach, and this has always been a question of mine as an instructor. When we're teaching these guys how to do report writing, typically it boils down to how do we write comments, where do they place them in the reports, what sections do they go in, and then how to fill out the 7-6 according to the standards of practice. What is it exactly asking for, right? The problem that I find as an instructor is we can show them that on paper, right? We can teach them that. But as soon as they get out there and they get a software where they're doing this digitally, all of it goes away. All of it. And it's
Why?
because there's all the different softwares out there. There's such a learning curve.
There's a large amount of comments that people actually, as in your general inspector that starts out, he's got this much comments. As in Steve, myself, and some other people, is my comments are 396 pages.
Some of the software now,
Just
they're
comments.
trying to make it so simple and fast.
Not my report.
Just
Just,
for someone who doesn't know, has zero experience, now they got software that just lets them, oh, that's a good comment, and they're just going through and touching screens and they're done. They never really wrote the report.
most
Like,
computer systems are.
Like,
cloud-based
yeah, like I have a template on mine that has cloaked items and it's got all these things that are cloaked and I just hit activate which ones actually apply to that particular inspection.
And then you look at ones and you go, oh, how do I write this one? And you sit there and you go, no, I don't like that word. I don't like that word.
But and I'm not sure how to do that because software providers are trying to make it easy. So they're jumping from, you've taught them how to handwrite a report like we did 20 years ago.
Right.
And then now they're giving them this software and that transition is like, well, but that's.
I wonder if defining what is expected in report writing a little bit better.
Practical?
And in the practice.
Maybe. So report writing is a module, is it not?
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a module.
There's a module.
Yeah, there's a module. It's just actually, the last two that come to me for advice actually both said, I never wrote a report.
Yeah,
And
that's a
I'm
problem.
like,
That's a problem.
then you're gonna sit there and write a report for me.
That's a problem.
And
So I think if we can look at that from the education subcommittee standpoint of possibly having them supply the reports as part of their.
I know they're supposed to do 5. I mean, a minimum of
At
2.
minimum.
A minimum 2 submittal with their certification. So that there's actually reports that go along saying they actually did something.
But I think
They
this,
signed that piece of
I
paper.
think this feedback form is gonna help, because I think that will tell the student, oh, wait, I was supposed to do a
This was the
report.
expectation.
Yeah, I was supposed to do a minimum of 5 reports.
Yeah, and
Which
it'll
one
also
of my
tell the
5 answers?
educator, we're gonna ask them this.
Right, well, and then, I mean, some of this seems to be an enforcement issue. Like, people aren't doing what the rule requires them to do. So to add another rule is like, well, they're not following the ones we have.
So we need
If
to
we
enforce the rule.
Right, which requires a complaint.
How do you know to
So-
complain unless somebody says something, and that's part of it, because somebody's not gonna go, hey, I broke the rules, give me a license, you know?
So Tony's raising it. You're gonna do that? No, go ahead.
So, I mean, this is a really, really good point, because part of the reason we get complaints is because inspectors aren't writing the report properly. And the point I wanna make when the inspector writes a report, they have to keep in mind who they're writing the report for, which is the client. And if they focus on giving sufficient notice to the client, so that the client can make an informed decision, then they're doing their job. But if they're just piecemealing, plugging in here and there, the client may not understand what's really wrong with the house. So, but that's my feedback.
I have a question. Don't yell at me. I'm just gonna ask this question. Education providers, do they list who their field trainers are?
To us?
Yeah, or can they just do whatever they want? It's not required anymore, right?
Well, they have, we have qualifications that they're required to ensure that they meet for those who instruct.
But it's up to the provider to ensure those qualifications were met by whomever's instructing.
Right, and I will say that through our administrative audit program, we do sample instructors, and then we require the
Okay.
providers to submit to us what their qualifications were.
That's just, what you're asking the question where I'm asking.
Okay,
They can't just say, well, yeah, you've done 200 inspections in 1 year, you could be an instructor.
right.
Like,
So we set a requirement,
Okay.
yes. They are not required to notify us ahead of time who those instructors
Okay.
are. But as a result of an audit, which will happen every couple of years for a provider, we'll sample those
Can
instructors.
you use the audit to do for enforcement of the same thing in that audit, look at the reports and the records and go, hey, where's the 5 reports that the apprentice looked at?
that Billy Bob show you put in there,
Well, and how long do they have to keep them, is the question?
well, 3 years minimum.
The school
Yeah,
has to
we
get
really
rid of
would need to
All
put some
records are
thought
required.
into
Part
all
of that
of
whole
this.
discussion, like the whole
Right,
discussion.
I think so.
This is sounding very much like the experience audit for appraisers,
Right.
which, on the appraiser board side, they are streamlining substantially because of the burden it is to look at all these documents for every
Mhm.
applicant. So, and having the staff do that, and then what else? There's a snowball effect that comes with having these documents and requiring that of people.
That's the direction I was asking for, yeah.
Right.
The same audit that happens, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I think what we can do is kind of go back and see what's out there, what authority we have on this, and then bring it back to you, because if there is a compliance issue, we need to figure out how to address it without it being overly burdensome for those applying and for the agency to implement.
I think that feedback form is a good
You've
start.
got someone right here.
Shannon Gatewood. I'm thinking of put the burden on the provider, not the applicant. Don't have him submit it, increase your audit on the providers on, are they doing what they're supposed to? Rather than putting the burden on the applicants to, and your burden of making sure they submitted the 5 reports and everything like that. But I think auditing, upping the audits on the provider side.
That's where she was going, that's what they do on the appraiser side.
Right, that's
Is they
what,
audit the
but rather
business,
than
not the.
submitting
Yeah.
as an applicant,
Well,
rather
no,
than me
every
having to
applicant
submit.
does.
Everything.
But we're pulling back on what is required from that because it's so voluminous and
But that's why I was
requires.
thinking the audit process, if the provider's gotta keep it in their files, then when she does or whoever does the spot audit, they go through and look and go, oh, wait a second, now we need to talk. And then there's a follow-up with all the people who come through that
Well,
school.
to be clear, what's part of our audit now is the audit of the qualifications of the instructor, not
I understand,
report.
no, I understand, but what I'm saying is that maybe that's where the change comes, is that audit is expanded. Is to, there's an additional item when an audit is done, hey, we're gonna check this as well. But
And then there's also a subject matter expertise component that we would need to consider because my education team is not qualified to.
But on the appraiser side, they have people who are,
That's what they do.
that's what they do.
Right.
is
There's
appraise.
also a communications component. If we could communicate directly to providers to make sure they understand what the expectation is to teach report writing and to require those reports.
There's gotta be a happy medium here, to get the goal that we want versus not overburdening staff with, let's say there's 100 inspector applicants this year. That's a minimum of 500 inspection reports that they're gonna have to go through that they aren't qualified to know what is good or bad. Unless you're pulling a whole section of enforcement subdivision, which
Maybe
isn't
we should
realistic.
read all the inspections.
Yeah.
Just a question on the application, is there anything on the application that stays in the file of what school they went to?
Yes, their course completion records.
Okay, because that'd be, you can go to inspectortraining.com and when you do their audit and say, here's everybody that's went through your course, give us.
And it's published on our website also
Yeah.
in terms of the education history for any licensed holder.
I guess, yeah, it
Mhm.
is on.
Yeah, you can see where they got their
Yeah,
classes.
that's right.
Sometimes you can see, oh, the 3 different schools.
I mean, don't y'all keep their certificates on file? Does everybody have a file, or is that?
We have a
something-
digital record.
Right, so if they were to send in their 5 inspection reports with that certificate for digital record.
Yeah, but you gotta think of the hard drive mainframe
Well, the big
database, and it's
size.
gotta store it all. Even if it goes into a digital file and you can refresh, you still have to overcome with the data system. So everything is kept on there, and then you gotta realize the amount of space that it's gonna take up. When Lee just said 100 inspector with 5,000, it can overload a system.
Well, this is certainly something we definitely gotta have a longer conversation about. I think it's gonna be good for the education sector.
Sean's happy about this.
Sean is definitely happy about this. But I think this practicum evaluation form, which is where all of this started, I think is a good first step in getting some accountabilities that the student has a way to go back, wait, I didn't do 5 reports. And at least, have the conversation or start that process.
Have you
And
completed
there will
5?
be communications that go along with the launch of this form that will be directed to our education
Absolutely.
providers, which will
So they're gonna be on notice that
read.
we're gonna ask your students if they actually did 5 reports.
I think that may.
I've got to get the deer in the headlights look when I ask them.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You
What
ever
is
done
this
one
thing
before?
you call a
I know.
report?
You guys do it on software and stuff.
This isn't the report you're looking for. Okay.
Just quickly,
Speak up, so everybody here.
I'm trying to think, I just lost it. Keep going. It went away.
Okay, I'll figure it out. Okay, moving on. Item number 12, discussion of possible action regarding instructor course credit for ride-along courses. In our materials, it says item 12 in the materials, but I think that's incorrect. That's actually supposed to be for agenda item 13.
Yeah, we moved because we
we
added
read
that,
it,
we
yeah.
re-added.
I just want to make sure
that.
anybody who was reading it didn't try to figure out why we had that
So-
in there.
You can see small, but why this is on the agenda was the education subcommittee discussed an item in which an instructor this is continuing education instructor for ride-along can get credit for teaching the course. And currently, the requirement is the instructor teaching the course has to submit that certificate of completion within a week of teaching the course. So the question was, why is there a week, like that time frame component on it?
I
So,
thought that form was taken away.
It's still there.
This is just for continuing education.
Just for
Because-
continuing.
Yeah, because the
Right.
Not
practicum, the
okay.
practicum is not a ride-along, that's separate. This is the ride-along for continuing education, which is what the ride-along was created for in the first place. So what this rule does is it allows them to provide, the instructor to provide that certificate within their renewal period, but it also ties it to a course taught within that renewal period. So the week timeframe for providing within a week is removed, and instead it talks about the completion of within the term of the instructor's current license period, and that they provide it no later than the expiration date of that license period. So it just ties it in, they can do it.
Instead of them having to go, oh, I gotta fill that form out and send it.
Right.
They can do it within their
Gives them
renewal
more
period.
time to report.
Just reduces the burden on somebody trying to get some CE credit for the course they instruct. Anybody have any questions on that? So entertain a motion to forward this to the commission for approval.
So moved.
So moved, do I have a second?
Second. Just to be clear, it's for proposal, not
For proposal, sorry.
just want to make sure.
All right, so we have a motion, have a second. Any other discussion on this item? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion is approved. Item number 13, discussing possible action regarding 22 TAC 535.223 standard inspection report form. That is what is listed on agenda item 12 in the materials. Biggest thing is the single component. Single components now need to be on the form. And the addition of, if multiple boxes are checked, the inspector must also include the explanation as to the reason for checking multiple boxes in the applicable section of the report form. Now, keep in mind, this does not tell inspectors that they are required to check multiple boxes. It's just stating that if you choose to do so, you have to explain why. So there was some confusion I saw in some of the comments that were there as far as requiring multiple boxes being checked, which is not the case. This is just basically saying, if you do, because some inspectors choose to do inspected and not inspected in the same item, just that this is just requiring that you have an explanation as to why.
Can I refresh everybody's memory while we're at this? Sure. Is during the launch of the recent SOP class, it says you can't check more than 3 boxes. And when the first class that I taught, and I'm sorry, everybody can throw what you want, is that room erupted. And it took us an hour and a half. Mike was actually teaching. It took us an hour and a half. We had to pull out the standards of practice. We had to read it. We had to go through it all. And then there was, I know it says in the beginning, not inspected, nothing that you didn't inspect, not present. But the clarification about not inspected was, why didn't you inspect it? Because that goes towards enforcement. And that's the first thing I did is I called Tony going, hey, I got a question. And then I brought it back around, and then I went to schools, and everybody else was like, well, we're just following what they told us to say. And I'm like, okay, Tony will also agree that there's not a real clarification, and that's all we're trying to do is get the clarification out there about the boxes. I personally, and most of the people in this room have checked 4 boxes, 1 box, 3 box, doesn't matter. You can check as many as you want, but clarification of what each box really truly is has never been there. And unfortunately, say they have actually said, do you have to write deficient if you get a comment? Is the comment saying that it's deficient or not? So that's where the clarification that we're trying to get to on this. Does that make sense, where we're going in this whole question about the boxes?
Yeah, it makes sense, but it states in the standards of practice that if you check NI not inspected, you got to tell them what's not inspected, right?
Yeah, it is, but it's kind of in all the jargon of other wording. It's not, this is actually an informative information to reiterate back to the standards of what we were trying to put out in the last letter that went out, right?
I mean, so if the stuff that's not present, you gotta think of a comment of what is not present, is that what you're saying?
No. If
No.
you say inspected and not present, if you put, if multiple boxes are checked, then,
Then.
oh, we can,
Oh,
ask him. I
I've
guarantee
done
you.
all 4 multiple times.
And he and I are different in that. There's never been a situation where I've checked all 4 boxes, but there has been his, and I understand his explanation.
This an evaporated
My
drain
business
lines were
practice,
still there.
I do it a little differently.
Yeah.
The only thing that we're doing here is not trying to change anybody's business practice, just saying, if you are checking multiple boxes, you just have to describe why.
Like if that, so I'm gonna
So
give
if you
these.
do inspected and deficient, and not inspected, you're gonna put the not inspected, but inspected speaks for itself and deficient speaks for itself with the deficiency.
But not-
Let's say there's 2 fireplaces, one indoor and one outdoor.
Then I make 2 different
But
sections for that.
you can't inspect the outside one for whatever reason, redo the mantle or whatever the case, but you inspected the inside one, and the gas line wasn't sealed coming through. You're gonna put inspected and deficient for that one, but possibly put not inspected for the one outside. That's kind of what he's referring to. So if you're checking multiple boxes, all this is saying is, you just gotta explain why.
Now, I'm gonna give you the easiest example. Stove. I don't care if it's plugged in, not plugged in, gas is turned off the house and everything else. Are you gonna check to make sure it's got a tip? Are you gonna check the door seal?
Yeah.
But are you gonna turn it on? You can't.
I'm gonna attempt to,
But if there's no power or no gas,
then you gotta.
then you
put
actually
everything-
put not inspected, gas not on.
Right.
The reason for the non-inspected is to clarify, to help enforcement. And that's where it all comes down to, because enforcement and legal have had this beat up all the time. Because it says it all over the place, but we're trying to get it out there that if you check multiple boxes, you have to describe what you didn't inspect.
Well, sure, and that's just not inspected. If you check not inspected.
But why didn't you inspect it?
Well, yeah, it should be why, and I actually, in the
I'll-
training manual that we're working on,
I
went in and reworded that.
But that's what I'm getting at, is you're one of schools that the other ones aren't doing it. That's what the whole thing comes down to, is multiple times, is the complaint comes in, is the consumer was not informed they didn't complete the part that they put inspected and deficient or whatever it was, or just inspected. Well, there's no power to the house. Well, every area that needs power should say not inspected, no power to the house,
I agree.
not just in one location.
I agree.
That's where the whole thing comes down to. I see where you're agreeing, I just want everybody to understand, it has been, from what I've seen from enforcement, or what I've seen from inspectors, and what I've heard from consumers themselves, and being on that side of lawsuits, going, well, should have gave a reason why.
I agree.
And it's not to cover him, it's to inform the consumer why.
Right.
It's not, it's no way, there's nothing in this whole thing is to protect me. It is to let the consumer that I couldn't do something, and if there's a problem, they need to see a specialist.
So you're not talking about saying why you inspect.
I'm at the point of not inspected, if it's not present, of course it's not present. But, I'm sorry, did you want?
Well, Tony has prepared a sort of an explanation, an article.
That's what I was getting at.
That has a further explanation, and really, there's no downside to clarification. Like Scott was saying, sometimes the client doesn't understand what the report says, and when you check multiple boxes, inspectors don't do things the same way. Everybody might do it a little different, and sometimes it's hard to understand, so I think, if you check multiple boxes and you explain why, I think it's just good for the consumer.
So, yeah, as Tony mentioned, and I believe you guys all saw this at the last committee meeting.
We did.
We presented a instruction report that's just gonna be part of, on the website for an inspector to download.
It's
And it
clarification.
clarifies what, not only the boxes, what you're supposed to check, but if you check multiple boxes, what the rationale is and what you're supposed to do. The reason we held off on it is because this rule also takes care of the single item inspection as well. And that's also part of this instruction on how to fill out a report, since that's now gonna be required for single item inspections if the rule goes forward.
And again, the single item where people actually like, well, I'm doing a phase inspection, doesn't matter to me, you can do whatever you want on a phase inspection. If a realtor is involved, it is a real estate transaction. If there's a title transfer of a home in the state of Texas, that means there's a real estate transaction. If somebody is purchasing a property and you're gonna go out and inspect one item, it's a real estate transaction. I don't care if you first sell by owner, buying by buyer, you still gotta follow the rule. The form says it is for a real estate transaction, not for a realtor.
This is substantially complete.
Well, if I'm gonna go out and do a foundation inspection, I still use the correct report and just click not inspected and just.
But you don't have, it's not required.
Unless the house is substantially complete, these standards.
Hailstorms happen, somebody comes out and says, hey, we inspect my roof, it's not going on the other report.
That's a finish.
That's where the confusion comes around about the single item.
That's gotta be substantially.
Right, so that's where a lot of guys were like, well, if I'm gonna go out and do one item, that's fine. And that's not saying you have to do this report, but they're talking about roofs or, somebody, oh, I think my foundation's cracked, you come check it, okay, but that's not, they live in the house by now. There's where the confusions come
It's
down
not part of
to.
a transaction.
It's not, but if you're doing a transaction, then we should use the correct form. That's where we started this whole thing about that too.
I mean, it gives the consumer the benefit of seeing that preamble to know exactly what their rights and everything are.
Because it is a
Absolutely.
real estate transaction.
And it's one little extra step of tedious of NI and the other stuff. That's fine. You can even have a template set up where you NI all of your categories and just uncheck the NI on whatever one that you're inspecting and put your information.
Templates
in
take
there.
10 minutes to make.
It does, yeah, it does not take that long, yeah.
The article coming out addressing both,
Yes.
can we highlight real estate transaction?
The word real estate transaction.
Actually, I was just, as you were speaking, I was just adding that language to the draft language for the form.
This, as an inspector, you are doing a real estate transaction. You're not doing it for the realtors. Realtors, excuse me. You looked at me.
It's not a docator.
So, and I'm sorry, but I've been behind this since the beginning, when we first thought of this up, it actually came from an attorney that asked me questions, and I went, you know what? And I started going back and I was reading everything going, it doesn't say that. It's the real estate transaction.
So another meeting after this.
Just for.
I know, I got a bit of work too.
Just for clarification though, this form, this article and form will not go out until the rule is actually adopted, because it makes those changes, so.
Right.
So this, while it's drafted, you guys will see this at the next inspector committee meeting. Should this go forward, you'll see this at the next one prior to adoption.
Does anybody have any other comments on it?
Okay. With that, so I want to give a great opportunity, and we did see a lot of comments on this.
And I think it's there's
I think a lot of it is
miscommunication. Really, everything I read, they're not understanding, we're not trying to change a rule, we're not trying to hurt anybody. We're trying to help everybody clarify a lot of stuff.
Don't see any there. So I entertain a motion to submit for proposal, right? So adopt the standard inspection report form changes as noted.
The recommendation to adopt.
To adopt.
I recommend you adopt that.
So I think that was the motion made by Scott.
Yes. I make a motion to recommend to adopt. Does that make you happy?
There you go. Thank you. I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Steve. Any other discussion on this item? All right. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye, I can see that. Any opposed, say nay. Motion approves. Item number 14, update regarding legislative session.
That is me. This will be short. I wanted to just update the committee on the potential progress on the repeal of the Inspector Recovery Fund. That bill has been filed or been sent to a House sponsor and a Senate sponsor. It's been sent to Ledge Council. We're waiting to see the official bill. It hasn't actually been filed. The bill is not been filed, but the language has been sent to Ledge Council and the authors have received it. So the next step is the actual file the bill. We'll let you guys know as soon as the bill is actually filed and we have a bill number and everything. But the other thing I wanted to mention that does have a potential impact on inspectors is HB 697. That is a bill that would require, it changes the seller's disclosure form to require the seller to note the type of gas plumbing.
Yes.
It's been filed, this is the third session it's been filed. It went further last session than it had the previous session, but this will be the third session it's been filed. It's just like any other seller's disclosure notice, it's if the seller is aware of it. But the reason that it impacts you guys is because CSST is one of the items listed, and that's always been an issue that inspectors have had to address, so.
Which now we have to put in, report with.
We already have to, and this is actually where we piggybacked off of that to start with, is that's when Sean and I were doing it. I found that and went, hey, legislation started to ask a question on the sellers, who's more inside in the attics and crawling underneath the houses than the homeowner? So that's why we moved to put it in on our side. So
Who's the sponsor for the House and Senate bill? You want, if you can tell us?
Oh, yeah, no, I can tell you. Senator Zaffarini on the Senate side and Senator Kempel on the House side.
Capel?
Kempel. Kempel sponsored it last session when it got to the Senate, and Zaffarini was likely gonna take it up, but it just never made it through that, so.
Wheels are in motion.
They had much bigger fish to fry too.
We're getting there, we're closer now.
So,
That's it?
yes, sir.
All right, item number 15, request for future meeting agenda items. Anybody have any items for future agendas that they would like to see on there? We'll have, hopefully the SOP and legal will at least come up for discussion. For that one, because we should be much further along with that.
Yeah, we should have that by April.
We'll have some rules.
Sorry?
Lots of rules to talk
Lots of
about.
rules, lots of rules. Okay. Anybody else have anything else for future meeting agenda item? Okay. Item number 16, discuss, future meeting dates.
Second Tuesday of next week.
So we have April 18th, in theory is our next meeting.
It's on the website.
It is on the website.
Yeah, it is.
It's on the website. That one will be really
Tax day.
That'll be, yeah, that's gonna be real tight for me because I have to get home the night before that, so that'll be interesting.
Just don't go home and feed the cat, just come straight.
So currently, is everybody still okay with April 18th, 10 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay.
I may be pulling a Scott trying to get around that. All right, so then the next one, July 17th is what we had potentially slated. Oops, rewrite them up. That is a Monday. We have a couple alternative dates, but July 17th at 10 a.m., does anybody have any issues or conflicts with that date?
Mondays are just overall easy already.
Mondays are Mantic Mondays.
Yeah.
Mantic Mondays, Frantic Fridays.
Taco Tuesdays.
No.
Yes, it's Taco Tuesday, see?
I
see
Wednesday as an alternative.
Is there a problem with Tuesday? We have a realistic.
That's for after work.
Taco
The
Tuesday.
big.
Tuesday is Tuesday all day though.
So basically, the alternative dates are Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
Is there a reason Tuesday doesn't work?
I personally like Mondays to get out of the week and be done.
The 18th, that might be.
It's one less day I have to deal with traffic driving down on Sunday night.
It is
I
not.
don't care about you driving.
Be on time, then talk.
Is there a fourth of where?
Alright, so we have it initially set at 17th. Does anybody have actual conflict with the 17th of July?
No.
Okay with that? Alright, let's set that for 17th. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I was not aware that that rule had been proposed at the commission meeting 223, so I know you guys have another meeting, but I think it might be good for you to look at the form language. I have it up, and you can look at it and determine whether or not you want to move forward. That way, once the rule, if it is adopted, we can go ahead and publish it on the website. I should have brought that up when we were discussing, so if you don't mind, stepping back to that agenda item 13, just so I can pull it up.
That's fine. Let's go ahead and step back to agenda item 13.
I'll make it quick, I promise. Okay, let me share my screen.
13 is the report form. You probably have the old, you have the old agenda.
Okay, so I don't know if everybody can see this. Yeah. So, the first part of it is just talking about what the requirements are, just in general, you know. Can an inspector check multiple boxes? Yes, and then it explains what each one does.
And this wording is basically out of the training manuals and right out of the book. It's just clarification of what, there's been confusion out there.
Right. So, and then it gives, you know, it gives examples of when both, you know, should be inspected or checked, and then it says, so again, that's That's the multiple boxes section. There's a portion up front too that just has the, like, when is the particular box appropriate? And that's, again, as Scott mentioned, out of the rule. And then the final portion is the highlighted bit is the single inspection. So I changed this as you guys were talking. So the answer is yes, if an inspection is conducted for a real estate transaction or a potential real estate transaction, you must use the property inspection report form for any inspection, including a single item. And then the instruction on what you do, you just fill out the form as required for the items you did inspect and check not inspected for those that you did. Do not delete any section of the report.
Do we have to, okay, we said anything that's not inspected, you have to say why. So we have to.
That's
write
if it's
in-
multiple boxes, right? Or is that?
No, that's.
Okay.
No.
You know, on this one, even if it
I think
isn't.
this one here is, not asked to inspect.
Yeah,
phase
client
inspect.
asked not to inspect.
I mean, it's simple word.
Oh, yeah, explain the reason.
You got to fill it
Was-
out.
Yeah, explain the reasons. Because you conducted a single item inspection of the property.
So you just cut and paste that in.
Yeah, you just say.
Yeah, you can just put that in your template on every single section, in whatever section you're actually inspecting.
Erase.
Uncheck, put inspected, erase that, put whatever you're.
And it's something you're already doing.
Yeah.
That's the
Not-
easiest way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just repetitive. It takes, what, maybe 48 seconds to a minute and a half, depending on how fast ADD you are.
And does that say specifically for
It's real estate,
buyer or sell?
real estate transaction.
It's irrelevant whether.
See, the confusion also comes as in new construction, you're like, well, I'm called out to do a phase inspection, or I'm called out bank inspection. That is a real estate transaction. And that's where everybody's like, well, I can do whatever I want on it, because it's a phase. And I'm like, there's a title transfer. That property has a deed on it.
Under 80% complete.
Yeah.
Substantially complete. That still falls under that. I mean, either you.
But this gives you an option to go one way or the other.
You can do it either way.
So this kind of applies to a real estate transaction where they don't want a whole inspection, but they just want the roof.
I
Exactly.
want to pick those
It's a
five letters.
narrow, it's a pretty narrow group.
Whether it's like a 4-point inspection or a single.
We started this years ago when, during a real estate transaction, certain parts of the state, they were doing Chinese drywall.
Yeah.
And they were
Yeah.
tired of, I guess, I didn't say that if they're listening, filling out the whole form
Yes.
just for the Chinese drywall, so we created this.
And that's where it didn't need to be that way, because somebody was already living in the house.
Yeah.
There's no real
Well,
estate transaction.
well,
This
this-
wording is for the real estate transaction.
So that, yeah, that, sometimes it was, somebody was buying a house and they wanted to make sure, because they saw the blogs about it, do I have Chinese drywall? So they didn't want a whole home inspection, they just want somebody to look to see if they had Chinese drywall as part of the transaction.
More than happened, and I know this happened to probably a bunch of people, is somebody's had an inspection done, and the guy's like, well, I don't go on roofs, but they're gonna call somebody else to go on the roof. It's not a roofer, so then again, you're still in that transaction period, is where we bring it all back around, is, I know guys that going to P and V, and I'm like, why? Well, I do partly, Bob does the rest.
Well, and like the bank inspections, most bank inspections, the house is not substantially complete.
You know, they have their own form.
Draw inspections on there, they have their own forms for it, and most phase inspections, I'll do a number of inspections up until sheet rock is up, but then just one when the house is done.
Yeah.
You know, which is gonna require, which I do on the form.
Can you add a line just to say, this does not apply to re-inspections of the same property as it is in the rule?
That's already in the standards.
I know, but just on this form.
Oh, I got you,
Because that-
just for
that
extra
seems-
clarification?
That seems to be a
Okay.
lot of people's reading through the email comments and stuff.
Where
Yeah,
would I
this is
put,
gonna-
where would I put that? Like, what portion is this? Under the yellow? or-
Add a line.
Instead of when I say this does
Just,
not
this
apply
does
to
not,
re-inspections.
yeah, just add a line.
Yeah,
This
and,
is-
you know, in accordance
Where you got at
with
the bottom
the
says,
current
do
rule,
not,
whatever
yeah.
the number is.
Because it is still a real estate transaction.
I'll make it pretty, so.
There was already,
What's
yeah,
that?
You've
some of the
already-
comments
You
he's
go
talking
do
about.
one and I
So,
go do a re-inspection.
Re-inspections?
To me, it's not a re.
Absolutely.
Okay, what do you want it to say?
It's the same.
Well,
Yeah.
hold on.
Yeah.
Just see for a really good point. If Lee went and did it, and this has actually happened too, sorry, is Lee can't get to it, so they hire somebody else.
He doesn't do
That's not
re-inspection.
Right.
That's
Only
what I-
re-inspection is the
so
same person is doing it.
Yeah,
I get
the
those
re-inspection
calls.
is limited to the.
So the way the rules, this section does not apply to re-inspections of a property performed by the same client. to me,
Should
that's,
say same,
that's not the
same.
same client.
No,
I
it should say-
didn't perform an inspection.
I understand, so what I'm saying, this,
So it's
hold
not
on,
the
what
same
he just,
client.
what was just said is, this does not apply for a reinspection that was performed by the original inspector. It doesn't say that, but that's where, but the rule change would say that. That's where we're getting at.
Well,
we can pull.
yeah, but it's
right
called a
out of the
reinspection, but it's.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So go ahead. I think that's a valid point. No.
No, I don't care. I mean, I was just saying you can't, for lack, I'm just gonna say it the way I said it. You can't something unless you did it in the first place.
Right, yes.
So what do you want me to type? I'm
You pull the word right out of.
Right out of the SV?
Yeah,
Reinspection for the same claim.
for the same claim.
So I think if you do it, it's not a reinspection. You're doing a single system inspection.
Thank you.
Or you do full
Or
inspection.
they-
Or do full
They
inspection.
do, you go get an inspection, you write up 22 things. You don't go back. You don't do re-inspections. They call me and say, Steve, can you go inspect those 22 things Lee wrote up? And they cross the spectrum and all. It, to me, it's an initial inspection.
Or you have to use the full form and disclose whatever is not being inspected in line.
What if you go back and re-inspect something that you could inspect?
Couldn't inspect. What do you mean, like lack of power, utilities? To me,
You
it's a
Is that a
re-inspection.
re-inspection?
should be able to use the same form if it's the same inspection.
Well, I could, but it's a re-inspection.
Is that a
or-
re-inspector?
The house shall re-inspect.
That item that you didn't re-inspect.
You use the same form that you already started
I
with,
use the same
you,
report.
you add to that
Do you
report.
redate it or make an addendum out of
Make
it?
a note.
Yeah.
Make a note, inspect.
You have to change, you have to put the new date
The
because
date, the,
the information you put in the initial report is only good for that day of that report.
so
But his
most
question
inspectors use.
technically, that you've already inspected the house, maybe not all the components, but you inspected a house. You go back again, that's a re-inspection of the house.
Yeah,
Technically,
yeah, you just put updated on this date in that section.
unless you pause the inspection, agreed with the client, I will continue the inspection when you get it on, then it's one. If I give them the report, that inspection's done. Anytime I go back, it's another report, it's a re-inspection.
Well, that's the
If
way
you do
we're doing
re-inspect, if
it.
you do re-inspect something that doesn't, you shouldn't have to use form. If you're going back and say you couldn't get to the dishwasher, and you're going back and you re-inspect the dishwasher, if you did a full inspection, you shouldn't have to do a whole nother report, just the dishwasher. Because it's a re-inspection for the same client.
But could you if you wanted to, like I said,
You could.
that's how Steve likes
Most
to
of
do
us
it.
do.
You absolutely
Yeah,
can.
right, so that's okay.
So,
But you don't have to, that's the rules that you don't have to.
Yes,
Okay.
because it is technically a re-inspection.
this language look okay? This does not apply to reinspection of property performed for the same client. I mean, straight out of it.
And the only thing that would be gray is the definition of a re-inspection. Are we postponing it? Once you publish the report, I say that one's done. Anytime you go back, it's a
Is
re-inspection.
that a term already in?
It's undefined.
Huh?
I never bought
That'd be something we could just put, clarify.
That's
What
a-
is the
that's an
difference between,
addendum To the original report.
what's the
Unless
difference
it's a
between
multiple.
postponing an inspection?
What is this referring
I
to?
mean, I
Yeah,
postponed
you
the
want to
inspection.
I think you need to clarify what this is.
The reporting requirement is really the rule, says you have to report it, and you don't have to report it, it's just the reporting, the reporting requirement is what I would say.
We can talk.
Well, it's the form, I mean, you having to use the form is the issue.
Well, like, so maybe the location of this goes somewhere else, or
Right.
it's an asterisk or something, because now it seems like, well, wait, is that tied to that
What if I
question
put it
there?
under yes?
Yeah,
Yeah, I will update, I'll say.
something like that, like, yeah, you could do re-inspections, does this apply to re-inspection? No.
Updated on.
I think the content's there, I
We'll get
think
it.
we just
We'll
need
get
to
it.
clarify
Okay.
what
Yes,
it
we'll get
looks
it.
like, so that
Okay.
it's not confusing.
All right.
Now we're
Are you
done with
guys
our.
good, are you guys
Good now.
good with that? Do we need to take a motion or anything for that, or?
I think we are, this one isn't going to.
No, because it's just a
like an
form, it's just an
instructions,
explanation.
yeah.
Thank Appreciate it.
Yep.
Going back.
Well,
worries.
wait,
All
was
right,
this
so-
its own, sorry, now I'm gonna take that back. One second.
was almost.
Let me lawyer it real quick. Where's the
What's a
agenda?
lawyer?
Is it an action item on the agenda?
The
or-
agenda, no, the agenda spoke to, the standard inspection report form. This was just part of that.
Yeah, it was just 535-223 that we
Right.
made the motion. Yep. Okay. All right, so we have our next meetings is Tuesday, April 18th at 10 a.m. and Wednesday, July 19th at 10 a.m. Or excuse me, July 17th at 10 a.m. Sorry, not talking Tuesday. All right, anybody else have anything further? Yes, sir.
Would it, I was going through the FAQs related to home inspection, and there's some in there that could be updated and stuff.
Okay.
Where would that come as far as like the education community?
I
mean, the idea of-
Kind of the management of the website, which we do continuously. It does not surprise me that some of those need to be updated because our website needs to be updated and Summer's been working hard to just make sure that content is correct, putting things in a more logical place, that sort of thing. So I think if you sent the ones, and we could take a look,
I mean, I'm
but if
thinking
there's some in
that could be
particular,
like a little working group of just going through, there's lots of them in there. And going through and reviewing the inspection related FAQs.
It originally came from you guys.
Oh,
It came from issues that came up repeatedly. So it came up from, I don't know who originally, but it was.
like they wrote
It's
them,
before
or
me.
like
We
they would
went to
raise
them and
issues?
said, all right, this came, how would you suggest this to be answered and such?
Kind of like what we just
They've been
did.
massaged over the years and reviewed multiple times.
And plus all the rules have changed too.
Really, that's what I found, some of the
But
rules.
there are a lot. And it would be like when we review the test exam,
Oh,
I
yeah.
would expect the number that we have, it would be at least a whole day of review.
Is there a data dump of the inspector related ones that the
I don't know if we
committee
can parse those out. We do
I said,
have
would it be
some-
possible to send the committee members just all the FAQs for the inspector? And if we have time, we can go through it and submit them to you. If not,
Yeah, Mike's right, there's a lot of them,
Yeah,
and they're
imagine.
pretty different from the rest of the FAQs too.
It's
So
hard to search.
we kind of like isolated the inspector-related ones from the other ones, which basically all need to be reviewed and updated.
Okay.
So
Maybe just a periodic plan once a year.
I think the original plan was that I was gonna work with enforcement to see which ones are like outdated and remove some of those. I think we could do some cleanup probably before we send anything to y'all, because there probably are things that we could look and say like, well, this isn't a rule or, you know, what have you, so then we're pulling it down even more.
They are
And
relied
then tap on
on.
them for some expertise. Does that sound okay?
yeah, that works.
I just thought about it because there are some in there that are.
I haven't looked at those in a long time, so that's a good point.
And the search is kind of, you can find lots of them on water heaters, but if you search for water heater, it comes up with one. And I'm like, why? I can see it.
It's a long-term website issue,
Yeah.
but, I would like to.
But I like it.
tackle-
It's a good source of information
Yeah.
for inspectors.
Just may not be right.
It'd be easier to navigate too.
All right. With that in mind, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second motion and second. We stand adjourned at 12:22 p.m.
Next.
Right.
Quick note,
Oh, yeah.
if you are a member of the legal ethic SOP writing group, you might want to take like a 15-minute break and then.
The shorter the better.
I'm just gonna run downstairs and get some food from the cafe on the